I'm Nat.
And I'm Guy. And this is your home for everything Alberta independence, broadcasting live 6 days a week, Monday through Friday from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. And on Sundays, we're trying to release a pre-recorded interview every Sunday. This Sunday will be the first interview we release, so check that out.
And before we start, hello and thank you so much for joining us today. Please do remember to subscribe because it is what helps us out the most. And thank you so much to everybody that has subscribed. Also, we read all your comments. If you're new here, we have sections throughout the show, and after each section, we read anything that you have said. Of course, we'll say to you, hello to you in a few seconds, but we also prioritize super chats. So for that, we do pause the whole show once we see them and read them out loud.
And I will say our show is going to have our regular format with our regular sections all about Alberta independence. But after Stay Free Alberta, which is our first section, we have a little bit of breaking news on what's been going on in Ireland for the last 3 days. There's a bit of a movement that looks a lot like the truckers protested in Canada. I think they could really use some support from everybody in Alberta and around the world. The mainstream media is not talking about it. It looks like they may go into negotiations tomorrow.
So I'll start saying hello to a few people. Glenn Gunn, hello, says hello again from sunny Alberta. Well, I'm glad it's sunny now because it was snowing the other day. You let us know.
Yeah.
So hopefully it just keeps being sunny. Hello, Cole, as well. For some reason, I can't pop up your first message, but hello and thank you for being here. And Jess and GP, also, thank you so much for joining me on WDW Pro today. If you didn't know, every other Thursday, I am on WDW Pro to talk all things entertainment. And I saw Jess and GP there in the chat talking about Alberta independence as well. And I keep trying to give shout outs about that during that show, because that's a mainly American audience. So if anybody's here from that or is interested about that, well, this is the channel for it.
Yeah, they try not to talk politics too much, but they do cross over sometime. And I'm hoping more Alberta independence supporters will cross over when you're on Thursday and kind of flood the chat a little bit, maybe pressure them a little bit to do a video about it or bring up the issue. So
yes, Jess says, hi, folks. It says hits folks, but please don't hit folks. Park south of Grand Prairie, Husky Road, collecting signatures today.
Oh, fantastic.
More signatures. People are really upset with the most recent floor crossing. And of course, Carney is just doing the work for us, essentially.
Yeah, I don't see how that goes any way but good for Alberta independence. I mean, the rest of Canada is swallowing a tough pill right now. Eventually, they're going to go through the 7 stages of grief. And I think they'll come to the fact that Alberta independence is really the only way forward.
Yes. And Cole says it's 17 degrees and sunny in North Carolina.
Oh, fantastic.
North Carolina there too.
North Carolina is absolutely beautiful. So is South Carolina.
Steve Zafaro says, we love the Alberta Indies.
And yes, we do. And good to see you, Steve.
Edward says, hola. And apparently in Alberta as well, it will be 17 tomorrow. So apparently everywhere it's almost the same temperature here. I think we're at 20 something, but I hear the wind outside. Once again, because we are in Mexico and the infrastructure is not the best. If the power goes out and we go down, it's not on purpose. It's because the government doesn't want to improve power lines.
And again, we fled to Mexico. If you're a first-time viewer, you were originally from here, so it gave us a place to flee to. We were originally from Vancouver and voted for our own independence under the Trudeau government. I got an article tomorrow about Trudeau. I'm going to let it simmer for a minute until I can get some confirmation, but it's crazy information coming up.
Glenn Gunn says, hi, Jess and Cole. Thanks again, Jess, for what you do. Yes, and I forgot to say that. Thank you so much to Jess and to all the canvassers out there that are still collecting signatures. Especially right now, it's a great time to go collect signatures because of the anger rising and the stages of grief that we'll see. Once they hit around anger or maybe at the end acceptance, they will, more and more people, I think, will come out to sign and support Alberta independence. Hold on. It says, the channels I watch, all of them say the numbers have really grown since that floor crossing. And of course.
Well, the floor crossing is going to help extremely, but I believe on the 15th of this month, everybody's coming back from the camp jobs. The weather's going to be warming up. There's going to be outdoor events. That last 15, 16 days are going to be absolutely massive. I wouldn't be surprised if we got 100,000 or 200,000 signatures within the last 2 weeks.
And thank you to everybody that has been working towards that.
Yeah.
But let's start talking about that and the petition itself with Alberta Stay Free and everything that has to do with signatures, petition, the court case, etc. Yeah, but
well, we might go a little bit longer today because I did add that one section about Ireland.
Yes, but we're starting with Stay Free Alberta. Alberta Stay Free. I always say it wrong.
Free home Alberta, where the roots run deep and the money trees grow.
We are very professional here. Starting with the First Nations injunction from Eva Chipiuk says, quote, join us for day 3 should be interesting. As I sit here today, I can't help but ask, when did those in power become so afraid of the people?
Yeah, and there wasn't big updates today. After the show, I'm probably going to get more updates coming in. That being said, today was the big day because I think this is the day the Stay Free side kind of presented their case. So there should be big information coming out later on. But she is one of the best sources for daily information about the court case. It looks like it's really going towards the Stay Free side. So this is very good. We all kind of knew this was a fraudulent case. We were just wondering, like, ideologically, will a judge come down on a crazy decision? Ideologically, this isn't Alberta, so it's less likely than the rest of Canada, but we've seen crazy decisions come out all over the Canadian legal system.
Exactly. And also, I don't think you added it, but I was passively watching, but you were watching Jeff Rath and...
Oh, yeah.
I always forget the name. On the Fringe.
Yeah, I was watching The Fringe with Jeff Rath and the other few guests they had. It was absolutely fantastic. It seems like on the 26th of this month, if the injunction is held off, everybody's going to submit their signatures at that point. So that will give us quite a bit more time as long as this court case goes our way, as well as if there are any Americans, and there are a lot of Americans that do watch our show, you cannot donate to a lot of the organizations in Alberta because it's illegal for a lot of different reasons. Jeff Rath went over that. So that was fantastic to know. Yeah, The Fringe had some fantastic questions last night.
And speaking of Jeff Rath, he does thank Mark Carney today, saying, thank you, Mark Carney, making Alberta independence a reality, one floor crosser at a time. Because now even Elie Continental, who has stayed pretty much neutral, he has interviewed Jeff Rath before regarding Alberta independence, so trying to bring, at least what's happening in Alberta to the forefront, saying, I don't think most of the chattering class understands quite how damaging floor crossers are to democracy. These floor crossings will change the outcome of the 2025 election and invalidate the democratic decision Canadians made to elect a minority.
Yeah, it's not just that it's damaging to democracy. When you win a majority government that way and crush all hope of national conservatives, it's not like I thought it was going to happen anyway, but a lot of national conservatives want to hold that hope against all odds. That little bit of hope is gone, and what that does is push the nationalist class into Alberta independence. And from there, you're going to get a lot of bigger creators that cross over to U.S. creators. I mean, this has a good opportunity to become a worldwide global movement now.
And especially when we're seeing other similar things happening around the world.
Yeah, exactly. What's going on in Ireland has a lot of similarities to what happened in Canada, so much so they have a Canadian police officer that's from the Toronto Police Force, or used to be, running their media, which is crazy.
Mm-hmm. But also we saw an interesting figure kind of come quietly, almost in support of Alberta independence, and a lot of people didn't expect it. Could be positive. Will be positive, in my opinion, at least. Western Standard says, Musk says Canada is cooked. Alberta independence advocates seize the moment. Musk says that Canada is, well, it just repeats, but yeah.
Yeah, this is absolutely massive. I mean, he runs X, so the odds of a lot of censorship being put on Alberta independence, at least through the X platform, I say are going to be very limited. That being said, I was looking into the CRTC today, and they do seem to have a lot of reach with inside YouTube, X, and all other American platforms. The question is, are they going to be able to request algorithmic changes? But with X, I think we're pretty safe. And that's why we do have a lot of presence on X and on YouTube right now. We profile a lot of content creators on this channel, and those seem to be the big two platforms.
And arguably, as difficult it is to get presence there, if you can kind of drag people or subscribers over there to continue watching there, especially if they do attempt to do something. We do know one of the creators of RUMBLE is from Canada, so understands the restrictions that might be and probably will be further imposed. And then Elon Musk now saying and supporting and looking towards Alberta independence as well. And the obvious that Canada is cooked is also good when it comes time for that censorship push to come.
Yeah, the owner of Rumble is originally from Canada, moved it down to, I believe, Florida to protect freedom of speech and protect what Rumble can and cannot put on the platform. So I'm sure he's going to be a big supporter of independence as well.
However, Facebook or Meta in general, probably TikTok and others, I wouldn't put it past them. Yes, they respect the freedom of speech in the US now because they've been kind of asked to and almost forced into it. But within Canada and other countries, even here in Mexico, both Meta, TikTok, Snapchat, they have all agreed to start going after and censoring certain opinions and certain people. So they're not, I wouldn't put it past them to do it in Canada as well.
Yeah, and the general legislation for most countries, and this is very specific to Canada, but a lot of other countries have similar frameworks. Once the platform reaches 10 million or more, the government gets a lot of control over the platform, so to speak.
But again, from Rise of Alberta, now actually Elon Musk recognizing it directly, Elon Musk just backed Alberta independence. David Parker said, yeah, Alberta independence is the only way we save what is left of it. And then Elon just says, yeah.
Well, where this originally came from was Elon Musk said Canada was cooked. And then David responded with that. And then Elon said, yeah. And I think he's going to keep it short and he's not going to have outright support of it because he knows the CRTC will be able to use that against him and start demanding algorithmic changes. But even a little bit of support, I think, says a lot more than people would kind of look into.
Because Elon Musk already battled in Brazil, for example, in France, and several other countries that also attempted to do similar things. And while they've reached some sort of settlement, I mean, Musk is still going at it, and they're still going at Musk.
Yeah, I would have loved to see a satellite phone out at this point that could avoid all censorship, but
we'll see. He's too busy doing robots. Ivano DeFazio, however, says, I need to get all this off my chest. I love Alberta, but I never supported a separation, even though I totally agreed with their grievance. I didn't want Canada without Alberta, but now with yesterday's fiasco, the floor crossing, I totally support Alberta independence. Who knows, maybe I will be Alberta bound.
And listen to that. That's exactly what I've been saying. National conservatives, there is going to be a great migration to Alberta so they can vote in this election, and so they can be citizens of Alberta once Alberta does separate. Mm-hmm. The people that are willing to move are really hardcore conservatives that are willing to uproot their life that were most likely planning to move to the United States. But Alberta is giving them hope and giving them another option.
And right now, we do see those people starting to recognize that hope. And we continue to talk about that as well for anybody looking towards the US. Maybe if they're trying to escape the insane asylum that is Canada, maybe looking towards Alberta. But once Alberta is its own independent country and gets full control over its borders and border regulation, I would say beware of the insane people that will now try to escape the insanity they created because they see the success of Alberta. So being really strict then about it as well.
Well, yeah, you need to be strict then. Otherwise, you're going to change the voting demographic. And for 93 years, Alberta has been conservative, a conservative voter base. That being said, something could happen just like what happened within British Columbia and a lot of other provinces where they take over the major cities. There's a huge cluster of population and they control the vote. And that's not something we want to see happen in Alberta.
We are seeing something happening in Alberta as well. Corey Morgan says, quote, the Chiefs are holding their performative tantrum in full regalia in the courtroom. Perhaps the others should treat it as a fancy dress party too. Because this is talking about the court case regarding the injunction from First Nations towards the petition.
Yeah, and I really hope Jeff Rath brought this picture up. Leave the picture up there. Not the one of the gentleman in the costume, but the headdress is there. Mm-hmm. They're obviously trying to ideologically influence the court with whether it's DEI or a lot of other things, wanting an ideological decision and trying to put pressure on the judge in any way, shape, or form. There are no photos allowed or cameras allowed in the courtroom, and you're not allowed to take pictures. That's why it's from a downward angle up. He was trying not to get caught taking this picture. They talked about this last night on The Fringe with Jeff Rath. Jeff Rath said, if there are any pictures, give them to me because they're not supposed to be doing this inside the courtroom. He wants to bring it up with the judge. I really hope he did bring this picture up with the judge.
I wonder what because I don't fully know the Canadian legal system inside and out, but I wonder what the courtroom decor rules are, if there's any left, regarding, for example, religious symbols or faith symbols, because I'm sure they wouldn't allow someone to come in with a giant cross on their chest and try to make arguments. So that would be another point against this, but they continue because From the Western Standard, Alberta First Nations claim misinterpretation of legislation led to a second Alberta independence petition. I'm still going at it.
Well, they're trying to muddy the waters more. They realize this court case is falling apart, so they need to figure out another way to stop this thing. And they want to say the first petition is the real petition. We need to null and void that second one. And they're trying to say there's legislation that kind of confirms that from them, but there's not. And if we're forced to pick between one or the other petition, meaning the leadership of Alberta and Danielle Smith, I think she's definitely picking the second petition because it had a much higher standard of you needed 2 pieces of ID as well as a lot of other things. All the people that were gathering signatures were certified and everything else.
And continues to have those strict standards, even bringing in notaries, I believe, to go over or specialists to go over the signatures and the numbers themselves as well, to verify them.
They went over that last night on the interview as well. So they're not going to submit any of the signatures. They're going to let this court case go through. If the court case rules against independence, they already have the signatures certified by an accounting firm. Okay. They don't want to submit the signatures because if they do, that's going to make it so they can't get any further signatures. And they want to go right up until the 26th of April.
And I do think that is a good plan because, again, it could also help to send a message even if the 177 has already been reached.
Yeah, absolutely. It will mount more and more pressure on the provincial and federal governments. Once you submit those signatures, there's a lot of things that can also be done, like they could sit on the signatures like they did with the last petition.
Mm-hmm. And Marty up north says they or someone are trying to convince an unelected judge to stop the 5 million people who live here from exercising their democratic right to self-determination. And partly because that has already been almost deemed not that important in Canada.
Well, and this is the whole point of specialty groups and classes. It's a small group of elites in the First Nations that a lot of rights are being given to, that their rights will supersede everybody else's. But for a small amount of money, a few $1 billion, you're able to buy all those elites and control all the country by saying their rights go first before everybody else's. And we see this happening in BC. We're going to see it happen in a lot of different other contexts as well.
And not even just in Canada, but other whole countries as well.
Well, yeah, and as far as speech goes, bringing in hate speech laws, bringing in compelled speech laws, as far as land rights go, we already see what's happening, not just in Canada, but around the world with a similar game plan. These governments want to empower very small groups because it's easy for the federal government to capture a very small group and then legislate everything around them, empowering the federal government itself.
Mm-hmm. But now we'll go to some of your comments before we get into the breaking news regarding Ireland. But again, very similar parallels to Alberta independence, truckers' convoy, and anybody that is searching and looking for actual freedom and independence from government. Glenn Gunn says, Eva is a true champion. Eva Chipiuk, the lawyer that has been giving updates regarding the court case.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a shame you can't subscribe to her X account. It's only subscription-based only, so...
Edward says, Mitch Sylvester, thank you so much. For some reason, his name always, and he's one of the most important ones. He's the most important name that I should remember, but my brain glitches. And I've been talking a lot today because I already did a 3-hour show. So sorry, but Mitch, yes, of course.
You were up very early. Anytime you do WDW Pro, you wake up at like 7 in the morning.
Yes, which is early for me because I stay up usually editing or trying to do other things until like 3, 4 a.m.
Yeah.
That's my usual schedule. So yes, I'm a little bit dazed and confused.
Well, yes. The day before yesterday, I woke up in the morning and she was passed out, face down in her computer.
That bad. I was asleep.
She was editing all night and she was passed out at the table because,
I fell asleep at the table, you can say. Cole says, Musk has problems, but a decent moral compass for smart rich guy. Yeah. And I think he has some sort of touch of autism, so I think that helps as well to steer him a little bit in regards to moral compass.
Well, I think what happened to his son/daughter really steered him in the right direction because before that he was going off the rails. That being said, I don't like a lot of the industries he's in, but he is definitely a champion for free speech, and we wouldn't be where we're at today without him and Donald Trump. And they really work together. Trump has had to give Musk a lot of cover in order to stand up in the ways that he did and buy Twitter and everything else.
And he's important because he has that power to actually do something and to almost try to safeguard free speech elsewhere now that he has X and has that. That gives him a lot more power to open up the channels to free speech.
Well, we cover a lot of what the EU is doing, and the globalists are we really rooted in the EU, but there's a lot of countries around the world that are working on their orders, and we see the plan once Trump is gone. If Newsom gets in, what they want to do is capture these social media companies through fines and litigation. We're talking in the billions of dollars. And without Trump there to kind of push back and protect free speech, you got to figure a lot of these platforms are going to bend because they'll be out of business and break otherwise.
Glenn Gunn says, kind of like him as a friend of Alberta. Who wouldn't?
No, and a lot of people don't know about Musk. I think it was British Columbia he used to live in, and he used to be a lumberjack for a little while before he moved to the United States.
Justin GP says, thanks to Nat and the guy for sharing all the info to everyone, bringing more news to the independent movement. Appreciate you both. Thank you so much, and likewise as well. Owen5B4 says, we got the great news today that our business can head to Alberta by May 31st.
Oh, that's absolutely fantastic.
Cheers.
And we keep hearing that from people that watch the show. They're moving to Alberta. They're bringing their businesses to Alberta. We keep seeing posts on X. We keep seeing stories on YouTube. Before these stories and these posts and these comments were coming in, I was saying we need to kind of support and facilitate conservatives that are independent minded to move to Alberta for the great migrations. Because if Mark Carney tries to fast track a lot of PR into citizenship so they can vote, we need to have a counterbalance to that, period.
Exactly. Glenn Gunn says, right on, you're so welcome here. Glad to hear from an Albertan there as well. Cole says, did you see the weird pagan song and dance at the Liberal convention in Montreal? Canada posted it.
Oh.
I saw it just as we were heading into the show, but I don't think you grabbed it for today. We can talk about it tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll grab it for tomorrow's show. I missed it. I didn't quite see it.
Yes, because the Liberal convention just started. And
Oh, it did.
It's almost not as, well, I won't say anything yet, but it looks very similar to the NDP. So again, merging and becoming the one big uniparty.
Yeah,
of the
NDP, the Quebec parties, all that ideology is morphing into one supermajority globalist party that is going to put the cage up around Canada. Also, I have to say, I watched the conservative debates. Juno News held it. I had high hopes for it. I was extremely disappointed. We'll talk about it in a little bit. We have I don't know if we have a clip, but we had somebody Aaron Gunn made a comment about it. So we'll talk about it then, but I thought they could have done a much better job. Let's get into the...
Glenn Gunn says, who cares? It's all a show about them dressing up and etc. Yeah.
Yeah, but again, sometimes that does have influence over the right judge.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. 3 more and then we'll go. We'll go to the next section. Aid 2.0 says, October 19, independence. Can't come soon enough. DeBilver says, good day, everyone. Good day, and thank you for being here. And Primoris 007 says, hola, Nat y Guy. I am late. I hope I didn't miss any good news. Maybe it's all bad today anyways.
No, there's some good, there's some bad. A lot of the bad news that happens in Canada and the world is actually always seems to wind up being good news for Alberta, whether it's high oil prices, that helps Alberta and Alberta independence and the deficit within Alberta. The nationalists or Mark Carney get a majority government, that helps Alberta independence more than any other thing that's happened. And that's going to have multiple influxes of people. He still doesn't quite have a majority. It's guaranteed because the by-elections, we know what's going to happen in those extremely safe liberal districts. But when he officially gets it, that's another boost to Alberta independence.
Exactly. But now let's go talk about important news and interesting news that's happening over in Ireland. And that does connect quite a bit to the Alberta independence movement and the Freedom Convoy before that.
And I will say we're going to go into Alberta politics directly after this section. This section is very important. The people of Ireland need the support of people in Alberta for their independence movement. And you say, what do you mean their independence movement? They have their own country. Yeah, but globalists have taken over that country. I follow Irish politics very, very closely. And it's not even just globalists, but the EU as well. The EU is sitting gas prices and sitting taxes. So if local governments want to take back their sovereignty and lower those prices for their citizens, they're unable to do it. And things are starting to boil to a rise. It's not just gas prices. Gas prices have set off really the fire that was simmering beneath the surface in Ireland.
And Ireland is one of those example countries, I will call them. For example, Vancouver is an example city where they start testing out, it seems almost, start testing out a lot of the crazy laws that then we see implemented on a more of a global scale or more widespread. Because, for example, in Ireland, they've had hate speech legislation for the longest time, even before England, for example.
Yeah, the EU likes to test out a lot of what they're going to do in Ireland. It's a shame what's happening to Ireland. These used to be a proud people, and they've had their country invaded by the globalists legally. It's all been done legal and under a legal structure. And Canada's fallen victim to the exact same playbook.
So let's go to the breaking news there.
Extra, extra, read all about it. Extra, extra, read all about it.
Do you just want to get into it, or do you want to give a bit of context?
Yeah, and I really filled out this section quite a bit. I want people to understand what's happening. This has been happening for 3 days. It's really coming to a head, and there's a new game plan the globalists are taking. They're actually going to go into negotiations with the truckers and farmers, unlike what Trudeau did when the truckers protest happened. So yeah, let's go into the first one. This guy's going to give a brief overview. A couple things have happened since then, and we'll kind of fill it out.
Do you want me to read it or just go directly?
Let's go right to what he says. Hopefully people can understand him with his lovely Irish accent.
So John Hannam says, is a revolution unfolding in Ireland? And yeah, I'm sure people can understand.
Morning, gang. Have you seen the revolution going on in Ireland at the moment, in the Republic of Ireland? I've seen very little, if any, coverage of it on UK news. But we're now entering the third day of effectively a lockdown. The trucking companies, the lorry companies, the hauliers, the farmers, many of the bus companies are not only refusing to work, they are blockading fuel depots, blockading many of the ports, shut down many of the main roads into certain areas of Dublin. And why are they doing?
And yeah, it's good to see another trucker style protest, and they're really broadening this thing out to farmers and other industries as well. But just like the truckers, they were smart enough to leave one lane cleared for emergency vehicles, and they made sure to make videos of that.
Doing it on the face of it, originally it was to do with fuel costs. Obviously, the fuel shock that has come through, they're basically saying that the Irish government are not helping enough. They're not taking any measures to try and alleviate the problems that these companies are having. And many people have been interviewed and have said that their costs have gone up 3,000, 5,000, 10,000. I saw one that said 14,000 euros a day more they're paying in fuel costs than they were back in January. And the government are not doing anything to try and alleviate that problem. What's interesting as well is, I don't know if you saw yesterday, I think it might have been the day before, in Spain, the Spanish government wanted to reduce VAT on fuel from the level of 21% down to 10% to try and alleviate the problems, again, for farmers, for truckers, for haulage companies, etc., etc. And the EU would not allow them to do it. They said that is against EU rules. VAT rates, etc., on fuel apparently are set centrally within the EU, and no independent country can cut those rates, which shows you just how good a thing it is to be out of the EU, because you have no independence, no sovereignty, can't even set your own tax rates when there's a bit of a problem going on as there is now. So in Ireland, this is now, as I say, entering the third day. It's complete lockdown. The Irish government are trying to claim these people have no support, that the public don't support the farmers, don't support the haulage companies and the truckers. But seemingly that's not true, because there's more and more protests amongst the general public also going on, who are widening the protests away from just fuel to what's happening generally within the country, to the massive immigration that is swallowing up their cities, to the lack of economic growth, to the general problems within Ireland as a whole. So the Irish government are under big pressure. And it doesn't look like the bus companies, the haulage companies, the farmers are going to buckle, are going to back down. So what's going to happen? Where do we go from here? Will the Irish government send in the Garda or even the army against them? If they do that, I think there'll be a general uprising.
And there is big rumors they're going to send in the military. I think they're going to try to go into negotiations first, and it seems like that's going to happen tomorrow. But if they send the military in against their own people, but they wouldn't do it against boats that were coming in on their shores filled with illegal migrants, this isn't going to shake out very well for the Irish government. Even the heavy-handedness of the police to this point isn't shaking out well for them. I mean, this is a real grassroots movement, salt of the earth people, much like the truckers convoy within Canada. And if we can support them, and you can support people on Irish social media trying to get the word out, because mainstream media refuses to talk about this issue. Today in our Alberta personalities, I actually put 2 Irish content creators as the personalities, so people might not be aware generally of who some Irish content creators are and how do we support this movement as well.
And interestingly, he was a Brit, so he was in Britain, saying that he wasn't getting any news in Britain about this, but he knew about it, so he was trying to get that word out.
It's extremely hard, and we've had people kind of plead with us through social media saying, if you live outside of the EU, can you please talk about this issue or that issue? Because there is a complete blackout within the EU, whether it's on migration or other things like the Irish protest. Okay, let's go into more details. He kind of gave an overview, but we're going to get into the next point of this.
And this is insane. From Table Salt quote, Ireland uses Canadian cop to crush protests. Again, she's pretty much used to it by now. Shauna Coxton, Deputy Commissioner of Garda Síochána, I guess, was imported from the Toronto Police in 2021. And she can be seen here using language straight from when the Canadian government illegally crushed the Freedom Convoy.
And these globalists, like, do they think people aren't going to notice things like this? Keep her away from the camera. People are going to put two and two together here.
They're no longer protests, they are blockades. These blockades are putting at risk supplies of food, fuel, clean water, and animal feed. These are critical for the nation and its people. This is not tolerable, and it is against the law. The willful obstruction of public roads and the movement of vehicles and persons are offences under various statutes, including the Public Order Act and Road Traffic Acts. As part of our well-established graduated policing response in dealing with protests, and Garda Síochána is now moving to an enforcement phase in relation to those impacting on critical infrastructure unless they desist and disperse from these blockades. And Garda Síochána is advising protesters to immediately cease blockades of such critical national infrastructure or face the full rigors of the law. They're no longer
Okay, and let's just make it clear here. They're doing nothing wrong. The people that are doing something wrong is the government. What has the government done to farmers? They're saying they're blocking critical infrastructure. It's funny because they're outsourcing and trying to shut down every farm in Ireland, telling them they have to call their cattle, and they're outsourcing everything to South America en masse. This is the EU's big plan. They want to export some finished goods to South America and import food. They want to make sure they shut down all the farmers on an industrial wide level within the EU. This is hurting Irish farmers immensely. I mean, you name it, all the things she's doing, the government does, but they do it in an illegal way, and they pass legislation saying it's okay for us to do it. But when you become upset and you try to hinder our globalist plans, that's not acceptable.
And it is almost, I'm not into the conspiracy theories as you are, but it almost seems like it's the sequel to the Truckers' Convoy, and they brought in the special guest that appeared in the first one. Now they're bringing in for the sequel. Like, it seems eerie.
Let's say something else here. Okay, they want to they're blocking oil from coming in, and people need oil. Yeah. Who the hell is blocking oil on a daily basis by putting a 60% tax on all gasoline and oil products? It's the EU through their carbon taxes. There's 6 ways to Sunday they tax it. 60%. So out of a $2.20 for, I think it's a gallon or a liter, $1.20 of that is taxed, I believe.
Let's continue. No Risk, No Reward says, quote, are the Irish government pushing for a civil war? Farmers and fuel protesters threatened with full force of the law and vehicles removed forcibly by Irish army. And again, if you're Canadian, this just sounds like it's too reminiscent.
And I just want to say, for the last 4 years since the Jibby Jab era, there have been rising tensions in Ireland. I follow Ireland very closely, just like I follow Canada very closely. And there have been boiling points where there was riots in the streets and things like this, but this is really come to a head, and I'm glad they're emulating what they did in Canada and doing peaceful protests.
Are the Irish government pushing for a civil war? Is that what they want? They refuse to sit down with farmers, business owners who are about to go out of business because of the tax gouging by the Irish government on diesel. They're in Dublin. They want to talk. That's all they've said. We want to talk. And they've been snubbed, demonised and vilified by Micheál Martin and co. And this morning, Irish Defence Forces heavy-duty vehicles were seen moving through Limerick towards Dublin. And the full force of the law will be brought to bear on those peaceful men and women that are currently occupying O'Connell Street and blocking O'Connell Bridge. All they want to do is talk. And this has escalated in the space of, 2 days, to getting the army involved, to having a full police operation come in, when this could have been dealt with by a simple dialogue. So that leads me to ask the question, what do the Irish government want? Are they pushing for a civil war? They didn't use the army to protect the borders, to stop legions of unknowns flooding into the country and then accommodating them. But when it comes to the farmers and the hauliers, the construction workers, the people that keep Ireland moving and feed Ireland, they're prepared to use the full force of the law within 2 days. And the IDF, you tell me, what do they want? What is their end game here? Because from what I can see and from what I can hear from multiple sources, that's what it's heading towards. Widespread disruption. And I don't mean blocking roads.
And there's two narratives forming here. The government's trying to form a narrative that they're moving troops around for training exercises. I don't think they're moving troops around for training exercises. They're probably moving them into strategic positions as they go into negotiations tomorrow if those negotiations don't go the way the government wants. And they're probably going to try to be very heavy-handed in those negotiations, knowing they have troops in place. That's when you're going to see those troops come forward. So it's very important to realize if negotiations break down tomorrow and they do move in these troops were never meant for training exercises.
And again, it's almost like deja vu. If anybody lived through the Freedom Convoy in Canada, we were reporting on it and going there on the ground as well. But it's almost like the exact same playbook from the governmental response, especially. I mean, the people are protesting something completely valid. And the fact that they have such high taxes imposed on an essential that is just for essentially ideological reasons, which is a climate change narrative, is completely justified.
But we have to realize they're starting to change their tactics. They realized Justin Trudeau not negotiating with the truckers set a bad precedent and didn't look good, and things didn't go his way by not negotiating. They are going to negotiate here, but I think they're going to go in very heavy-handed, then go right to the media saying they were unwilling to negotiate or meet us halfway, and then try to justify sending in the military. I think this is the new strategy. So it's good to understand what's going on with these globalist tactics, because if a truckers protest or something similar comes back to Canada, we want to know their strategies.
Exactly. And especially because, once again, we have here Shauna Coxton saying Ireland's government deploys the army allegedly to remove protesters' vehicles, as says the Canadian.
Clear that some people have significantly escalated an already difficult situation by targeting critical infrastructure such as fuel depots.
Okay, you can leave it there. I just wanted to have the top. That's why I was tapping on the desk.
Okay, do you want me to read it?
No, that's fine. Okay. We can go to the next clip. I grabbed a lot. The post where she was the Toronto police officer and they brought her over and now she's the spokesperson seems just a little bit coincidental to me, but I had accidentally grabbed both clips.
Che Bao says, quote, I'm informed that several Irish army officers have said they would refuse to deploy to the streets to clear cost of living protesters avoided by the Irish government. Sources say they would declare themselves unfit for duty.
Again, and this sounds very familiar as they're changing their tactics now. Why are they recruiting military members from other countries in Canada? For the exact same reason he's going to stay here. A lot of people that are from the country will not implement certain things on their own citizens because it's unjust.
Hey guys, just a quick video on the situation in Ireland regarding the fuel protests.
2 days, protest, some achievement.
We've been told now that the government's about to deploy the army to open up the roads and probably Ireland's only oil refinery. Now this is important. Ireland is an island, of course. It relies on 80% imports for its fuel, for its energy, despite the fact that the country is completely surrounded by seas with a lot of oil and gas in it. But the government, a guy called Ray Burke and his friends, sold the rights to that to foreign drilling companies. So we're completely reliant on foreign power for our energy. An island, wind, sea, forget it. We don't do that. We don't also deploy the army to the borders or to any sort of existential crisis that could threaten the existence of our state, like mass immigration, like issues with weather, and they never come out. But now they're going to be brought out onto the streets to attack, potentially, if they resist, the people who are protesting against this serial idiocy of the Irish government. It's absolutely remarkable that they would even consider this. Now, I've been speaking to people in Ireland, of course. I have a lot of connections in Ireland, and I have a lot of connections in the army. And I'm told that at least 2 senior commanders in the units that would be asked to do this work, which is the transport unit and the engineers, would not follow those orders. I've been told that. if they were tasked to go out against their own people. Imagine that.
Okay, and we'll go into the next one. I grabbed quite a few clips for this story. I want the people of Ireland to know that Alberta, Canada, and the rest of the world is with you. We hear you, and I know they're trying to take away your voice through censorship, like in the rest of the EU. After today, I'm really going to fill out the story. I will give updates at least once a day, but not quite as lengthy. Let's go into the next couple clips if we can.
From Patrice Johnson saying, quote, the government had no issue with restricting people's freedom of movement and freedom of mobility during the jibby jab era. Are people now beginning to see we don't live in a democracy, we live in a dictatorship and a managed decline as well?
Like, freedom of mobility is a basic right of every citizen in this country. And people need to think very carefully about denying people freedom of mobility and freedom of movement. That's something I take very seriously as a Democrat. Like, freedom of mobility.
And especially after the jibby jab era, it is incredibly ironic.
When we do it, it's okay. When they do it, because they're fed up, because the elites in that country are refusing to listen to them on every single issue. The citizens of that country have been demanding this, and this, and the elites have gone completely the other way. It's like they don't have any voting power anymore. No matter who they vote in, they won't listen to the citizens.
Exactly. Again, with the forecasting in Canada. Make the connections, people. Lawyers for Justice Ireland says hashtag no digital ID. In a digital IDs DBTC surveillance society, the establishment would freeze the bank accounts of the Irish hauliers, truckers, and farmers with a flick of a switch. Again, as we saw during the truckers' protest. What?
You don't have to play the clip.
Oh, okay.
If I start tapping, you don't have to play the clip.
Okay. Well, sometimes it means speak faster. The few protesters are threatened with the full force of the law, immediately seize blockades of national infrastructure, or face the full rigors of the law.
Yeah, and I brought this up specifically because they're not going to have to overreach like they did in Canada. They learned from that. They already have legislation where they can debank people. They've debanked a lot of people in Ireland for hate speech or speaking up against what's happening in school with LGBTQ being taught within the school. Yeah. One professor was, I'm thinking of specifically debanked. So it's going to be very easy to start debanking everybody that's in these protests. These people, my hat is off to you. You're really going to the line for this one, and the world does hear you.
And we covered that professor that was arrested a bunch of times for not wanting to go along with a compelled speech, very similar to Jordan Peterson, for example. But even here in Mexico yesterday, just as a way to round it out throughout the globe, here in Mexico, a law or a proposal was passed yesterday of a law that would allow judges and banks to debank people without any kind of judicial order first. So they can just remove people's access to their bank accounts whenever they want. And with BlackRock here as well, they're now talking about the digitalization of the economy, even here in Mexico. So again, it's not just happening in Canada. It's not just happening here. It's not just happening in Ireland. It's happening everywhere.
Well, and again, we have 3 more little updates on what's going on in Ireland. Then we're going to get back to Alberta politics. I felt it was very important to cover this in depth today because it has been going on for a few days and it is really escalating. And there are a lot of similarities to this and what happened in Canada.
Irish Patriot says the people are locking it down. Amazing. Galway port is fully locked down.
Yeah, and this is happening all across the country, on ports, on bridges, in small communities. So it's very decentralized.
How's
it going, everyone? We have Galway port to the fuel depot completely blocked from end to end, and we are not moving until we get a resolution to this current fuel crisis that's ripping through the country at the minute. If you're self-employed or if you're a farmer, or if you're in business in any way, I would urge everybody to stay out and support. Do not go home. Do not leave. We have one chance here and we have to grasp it with both hands. And thanks very much for the hundreds of tractors or trucks that turned up to block the full end of Galway, which is a port city, from end to end to stop the fuel coming in or out of this depot. And fair play to everyone so far. Stand your ground. Stay strong. Everybody wait together. Thanks very much.
And that's sounds like very similar messaging to what we heard in the truckers protest. I remember watching that every night. We were on the border for the BC truckers protest that were going on simultaneous to the ones in Ottawa.
Exactly. And also pretty much same messaging. It's the people going against the overlords. Michael O'Keefe says we're hardworking people and all we want is fairness. An Irish farmer is overcome with emotion as he tries to come to terms with his own government, sending in potentially the military to quell the protest.
Yeah, and I just wanted to get somebody on the ground saying what was happening.
You're finding it hard.
Very hard. We're out here on the side of the road, like corpers on the side of the road, just trying to get fairness. It's like the Taoiseach of the country's coming out, bringing the defence force to take us off the streets like we're peasants. We're hard-working people, and all we want is fairness. That's all we want.
And they've been putting Irish farmers out of business extremely hard over the last 5 years. It started well before that. Carbon taxes and other things that they're implementing in Canada, they implemented it on even a more strict level in Ireland. And they're feeling it now. They're at their wits' end. A small increase in gas prices will put these people out of business. And these have been their family farms for well over 100 years. And why will it put them out of business? Because all the regulations stacked up over time, where this is the hair that could break the camel's back. And this is the last clip, and this is the update. It came out just before we went on the air. They're going to go into negotiations tomorrow. They have the military in place. So I don't know what's going to happen, but let's get the update.
Mick Call says, quote, breaking news, government has caved and agreed to meet with protesters tomorrow. I will still say allegedly, but let's see.
Describe yourself as one of the organisers of these protests. You've been very vocal on it. You've been calling, and others have been calling, for the government to sit down with you. Are there any indications at this point tonight that there's a likelihood of a meeting?
Yes, we have good news tonight. We have a breakthrough. I got a phone call tonight, so we have a meeting in Government Buildings tomorrow at 2 o'clock or 2:30, I think. Who will you be meeting with? There's other groups going in as well. All the organisations have been called in, so it's going to be a quite large group meeting with government.
When you say other groups?
Like the IFA and FCI and Road Haulage Association.
So if you're going to go to this meeting at 2 or half 2 tomorrow, will the protest be stood down in advance of that?
Already tonight, in the last 15 minutes, we have pulled in the protest off O'Connell Bridge, and we have released kerosene oil from the refineries. So the word has gone down to lift the blockades off kerosene in case, for people, in case there was people running out of heating oil or hospital running out of heating oil or whatever.
So will that wind down continue? In other words, in the morning when people wake up, is there likely to be further disruption?
There will be, definitely will be, because we have a list of demands going into the government tomorrow, a list of very reasonable demands, and it's a list of demands that we need to keep actually the country running, because the business that we're going out of business is just frightening, and the government didn't listen and they didn't understand, and they were just so far away from reality. Like, we're all self-employed people that's on this protest. Most of us are self-employed, we run businesses, and we can't take the hits that's been put on us.
Now, these demands, you had 4 demands that we'd heard of: a cap on white diesel, a cap on green diesel, the carbon tax to be either withdrawn or abolished, and the increase not to be put in place, and the NORA tax to be abolished as well. Have you demands beyond that?
We might have one demand beyond that, and we will be actually looking for the government to go back and look at the Ballyroe oil field to open it up so we should produce our own oil. We have an ocean full of oil that we don't tap. I think it was Eamon Ryan that got locked down, but our country needs our own oil and our own security for oil, and it's there in the sea. Bring it in and use it.
Now, it's quite a shopping list. If you don't get those things tomorrow, or a promise or a commitment to do those things, what happens?
The reality is we actually can't afford to go home. It's as simple as that. My tax bill, my oil bill this year in my business, which is a quite small business, is up €70,000. I can't pay it, I can't afford to pay it. And the carbon tax is on agricultural diesel when we have no option. We can't avoid paying it. And in my business this year, my carbon tax bill of €21,000. And if I said today, I said about Micheál Martin, let Micheál Martin write a cheque for $21,000 and see how he feels about it, because he's forcing me to pay it. Why should I pay it?
All right, James, stay with us. Miriam.
And again, it's a 60% tax on all the gasoline and other oil products within most of the EU, but specifically Ireland. That's why it's just not like, okay, oil prices are up all over the globe. No, the majority of the cost is set by the government, and they've already spent that money. They've budgeted for things so that they're saying, no, we're not going to take it down. It's at an absolute tipping point, and it's a shame they're going into negotiations now asking for so little. They waited so long, and now if they get one little thing like the government budging on a little bit of the oil taxes, what about the migrants? What about the million other ways they destroyed your country with the carbon tax and everything else? Conor McGregor did put out a statement as well, and he is really the voice of populism within the country. It's a shame. He does have a drinking and drug problem. He wanted to run for government. They shut that down.
And we covered that for quite a while he was attempting to run.
He has a lot of scandals in his closet. I know people that personally know him, and I think he doesn't want a lot of those to kind of come out. And it's a shame because he is really the voice of the people, but he's got some demons in his closet, I guess. Okay, let's go into some comments, and then we're going to go back into Alberta politics. Thanks for sticking with us through that. We want the people of Ireland to know that we stand with them.
Glenn Gunn says, wonder if the government will trample the grandmas. I mean, again, they're using almost the exact same police, so maybe.
I wouldn't be surprised if they go into negotiations tomorrow. They arrest the leadership and sick the military after the people on the ground.
Mm-hmm. And Rafa, hello, says hello. He's heard us cover all of this before as well regarding Ireland. Glenn Gunn says, go Ireland truckers. Yes, exactly. Cole says, I have Irish heritage. Best of luck to them.
Yeah.
And I think it is important for people to amplify the message as well and what's going on, because that really did help during the truckers convoy in Canada back then.
Yeah, Ireland, I don't know if there is a way to save it at this point, because every single step of migration and things like that were done legally. So I think there's a tipping point where they just don't have the voter base to vote for the change that they need anymore. They also have the EU lording over them, telling them what they can and can't do. The first step would be to break free of the EU for them, and then they can go from there.
And thank you so much to Justin GP for the $6.99 super chat.
Thank you. That's
thank
really,
you so much.
really generous.
And thank you for being such a great canvasser too. Says Nat and the guy are awesome. Thank you. The Irish are also awesome doing this and actually standing up for themselves and maybe getting the government to at least listen to them, I guess.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I worked at a lot of Irish bars because I always used to be security at night, and you're either on one side or another as an Irish individual. When I talked to them, I thought they were all patriots. That's not the case. There's so much propaganda within that country, and especially the ones that leave have been very globalized and liberalized in their thinking. But then you get the other side, which are very, very, very patriotic, willing to step up and put everything on the line like these farmers and these truckers are doing. But there's not really a middle ground with the Irish. It seems like they're either on one side or the other.
Well, they have a pretty turbulent history, to say the least. And I think that has been kind of the fighting spirit, at least, has been bred into them for the longest time, and they've had to fight for themselves, their freedom, and their survival for centuries, I will say, as well as against the Brits. So it might be within them, but at the same time, that the almost similar to what happened to some Canadians, where the liberalization and the progressiveness that got pushed into because you have to be through guilt, through self-imposed guilt, I guess it does touch some of them.
Their entire political system has been captured, though. And they have multiple political systems sitting on top of that. Not only the Irish political system, but the EU and the EU as well. No matter what they vote for, there's no way out for them. And it's a sad situation that's going on in Ireland. They're just taking them down to the road to indentured servitude.
Troglodyte says, my grandfather was from Ireland. Well, there you go. And Cole says, my family was Scots-Irish with a little different. And again, there is so much cross due to multiple different factors, cross between Canadians and the British Isles, I will say, in general, just all of them. The UK in general, Ireland, Wales, Scotland, and Britain that are in Canada. So again, look into this as well.
Well, it's also important that Albertans support movements like this. This is on the ground right now in its most critical moments that will decide everything, whether this succeeds or fails. But there's going to come a point in a few months where Alberta's really going to need the support of the Irish, the rest of the world. And really, we're going to want the eyes of the world on Canada. So Mark Carney doesn't try to overreach with the Emergencies Act or some other underhanded, dastardly trick.
Exactly. And very important, Glenn Gunn says, just a reminder and a good watch. Tamara, speaking of specifically what we're talking about right now, speaking of, Tamara Litch and Chris Barber have a live show tonight, two heroes from the Truckers Convoy in Canada that are called under house arrest still currently. And yes, I did. I'm not sure you brought this up, but I did. I'm just going to bring it up now. Tamara Litch says, going to be a banger of a show, going live with David Parker in 30 minutes on house arrest, followed by an update from Jeff Rath and Eva Chipiak on the court injunction proceedings in Alberta.
We had another comment.
Oh, super chat.
Super chat, yeah.
JP Alberta first, hello, and thank you so much for the $20 Canadian super chat. Says the situation in Ireland should be a warning to Canada. When government becomes overbearing and stops representing the people, this is what happens. Strange that the Irish government doesn't remember the modern history of Ireland.
Well, with
That too. I didn't want to bring it up, but yeah, thank you for bringing it
with
up.
Mark Carney now very close to the majority government, and he will guarantee himself that Canada is going to become Ireland, and protests like this may pop up all over Canada at some point. Thank you so much for the super chat. It really does help.
But again, let's remember that it already did basically happen similarly in Canada, and the way that it got crushed and the way that they're still going after the people that represented that movement too.
Absolutely.
Yes. Sorry.
Well, I hope she talked. It would be lovely if she talked about Ireland tonight, because the movements are so similar right now, and it is at its critical moment. Alberta's critical moment will be coming up very soon.
That too. Cole says, "Good shout, Glenn." Exactly. And Glenn Gunn says, "Both sides are Scottish. That country has gone to the dogs. Most of the giant island has gone to the dogs, and all of its territories."
The EU has been able to take sovereignty away from these countries. They promised it was just for economic cooperation. Then they set a Chinese debt trap for all of them, took away their sovereignty, putting international law into all these countries. And the people are wanting one thing. And even if their government agrees, they're not able to implement because of the second layer of government and bureaucracy.
Glenn Gunn says, 100 years from now, people will think the Jibby Jab era was a bad dance phase. Well, funnily enough, there was like an actual crazy dance phase in history where particularly the women got into like this dancing frenzy and they couldn't stop. And I think a lot of them passed away from it.
I always call it the Jibby Jab to avoid censorship here on YouTube.
Glenn Gunn also says, they will say it was created by, yes, I'm saying it, Nat, Bigfoot.
And I had a story about a UFO. I think I took it out.
Yeah, you did, because I didn't see it.
It was supposed to be for RUMBLE.
Sam says it's Gragach in Ireland. I'm not sure if that was to make me sound like I'm speaking in an Irish accent. That says Ireland spelling much.
But there was a great sighting of a UFO from some oil drillers up in the Yukon.
Pentax Live says, let's go Alberta freedom. Yes. And Justin GP says, for natives just sign so much for their narrative, huh? Those are the kinds of stories that we should be continuing to bring up.
Absolutely.
Should we move on to Alberta politics?
Yeah, let's go into Alberta politics.
I'll keep reading your comments in a bit. And RUMBLE, don't think I've forgotten about you. They are showing up for me. I'll go into them after this next section.
He doesn't discuss federal politics. He only concerns himself with Alberta's independence.
Starting with good news from Kevin in Alberta, quote, as many as 42% will vote for independence, according to Poilievre poll in story in today's National Post. Add me to that number. A Liberal majority through backroom deals is the straw that broke the camel's back. Prior to today, I was on the fence. Not anymore. I will be voting yes to Alberta independence on October 19th. Thank you, Carney, for making that decision easier.
All you need is 42%. And what do I mean? He said, I thought we need 51. If 42% come out and vote, the other side's not motivated to vote against. We have winning numbers at this point. And as this thing goes on, as Carney does more, these polling numbers are going to go higher and higher and higher. And the higher we get it, and the bigger majority that we get, the easier it becomes for Saskatchewan and other provinces to follow in our footsteps. Are you okay?
Yes, I'm a mess today.
You were choking a little bit.
My eye is leaking. I'm not breathing properly. Everything's gone wrong. But good news, at least. Thank you, Mark Carney. And Keith Wilson says voting for Alberta independence is the only viable path to doubling Alberta's oil production. We're seeing what's happening with Ireland, who decided to completely ignore the fact that they have a bunch of it in the ocean that they sold off to others.
Well, they not only have mining resources and oil resources, they have everything they need in Ireland, as well as farming. They're shutting down their farming. They're not drilling for their oil. They're not going into mining. They're literally taking their country off the cliff intentionally. There's no other way to put it anymore. The direction Carney's taking Canada, when Canada has so many... Oh, we can stop one more time.
Managed decline, I will say. But... hold on. Thank you so much to Sean saying, what about MMIWG 2S LGBTQIA plus ending budget cuts? We'll talk about that in a bit, but thank you so much for the 199 super chat.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think you forgot one of the M's, because now it's triple M from what I seen today.
MMM, okay, sorry, MMM.
I'm just messing with you, but I didn't know what the M's were, and that's why when I seen it today, I was like,
more virtue signaling, and now even in a way that it doesn't even make sense. But we'll go into it. We'll get to it in a bit, I think.
Yeah,
We're
we do have that story.
Yes. But continuing, Brian Jean says the world needs more of Alberta's oil responsibly produced, and we have a goal of doubling our oil production by 2035. To meet this goal, we need more projects like this to avoid bottlenecks and to get our energy to market.
Yeah, you'll be able to double your oil output, but your mining is really the untapped resource Alberta hasn't dived into, and you're going to be able to do it immensely. And this is going to allow you to shoulder the impact of any up and down variance in oil prices.
Freedom Calendar, a great resource as well. Go follow him if you don't. He covers all of the things going around Alberta independence and conferences and get-togethers, etc. It says this is I can never say that. Reserve got $1.2 billion from Justin Trudeau, and First Nations are being kept in poverty. Unacceptable. Time for First Nations to actually get a better deal.
Yeah, and this is the dirty little secret. And this gentleman went through that particular reserve and showed the absolute state of it. And the fact that they got that many billions of dollars and it didn't trickle down and it stayed with the elites, you have to figure that many billions of dollars didn't just go to the elites. It went back around to the money pits and the politicians and the NGOs. They just distributed the billions to the First Nations. The First Nations then distributed a lot of money out to NGOs and kept a lot of it for themselves.
And this gentleman is Corey Morgan.
Siksika Reserve, east of us. They got $1.2 billion from Justin Trudeau a few years ago. So I went out there with my phone last year. Some people might be familiar with this story. And I shot some video from the public highways in some areas to show, after a few years, what did $1.2 billion for a few thousand people lead to? There's wild dogs, there's housing falling apart, there's garbage all over the place. So how did the chief and band respond? They charged me with trespassing because they don't want people to know. Siksika Reserve, east of us.
And it's a very similar story in BC as well.
Yeah, and I do recommend that video. I watched it before I grabbed that clip, and it was 2 liquor stores and a weed store. That's all that's left in that town.
Sorry, my eye is leaking again. I'm telling you, I'm a mess today. If it looks like I'm crying, no, sometimes because of my contacts, my eye starts leaking. It's just this one. So I have to wipe it every so often. Otherwise, it'll actually look like I'm crying. Not crying. Not yet, at least. But with the state of the world.
Crying for joy once Alberta gets its independence.
Then I will. Marty Up North says, the Indians are arguing that a new international border would hamper their treaty rights. How? I'm sure Canada would grant them passage. SHIT or S, just a few weeks ago, they flew to England. The Atlantic Ocean didn't seem to hinder their travels.
Yeah, they're starting to make all kinds of different complaints to see what will stick, like spaghetti at the wall. Like we showed earlier with that other story, they're saying, oh, there was 2 petitions. The first petition null and voids the second petition. That's not the case. Now they're trying to say this, oh, we have treaty rights. We need to be able to, well, you're still going to be able to access it because once Alberta takes over, nobody's going to hinder you. And Keith Wilson has made that abundantly clear.
And Jeff Rath down there also says, given that Canada would remain bound by the terms of their treaties, I've never understood how this agreement made any sense.
No.
So there you go. But they will continue, as you say, using those arguments. And we've shown a lot of the initial, at least I will say, because I don't think it's done. And I think it'll continue to ramp up. The initial narrative and propaganda that they're trying to set up, both from the CBC, but also the content creators that do bow down for the regime, the liberal regime, saying specifically this, that it is the whole First Nations issue that will hinder Alberta from becoming independent. And even within their own arguments, the reporters that are talking about this don't even know the issue as well or full well as Keith Wilson, Jeff Rath, etc.
Well, First Nations is working so good as a virtue signal and as a shield, and it's worked to take other groups' rights away in British Columbia and other parts of Canada. So they think that's the weapon they can use in Alberta, but nay. Alberta has already had a lot of the First Nations land ceded, and all the barriers are out of the way. The weapons that would work in other provinces aren't going to work in Alberta.
Exactly. Corey Morgan also says, how are the treaty rights being ignored in any way? I bet most of these protesters never actually read a treaty. Will Vester says, this was the scene outside the courthouse in Edmonton as First Nations members protested to seek recognition of the treaty rights amidst the Alberta independence movement. Inside the building, Justice Shayna... Blah, blah,
yeah, and I was shocked there wasn't more paid protesters. I was watching video clips from this. These were extremely small protests. And I think the reason why They don't want to have a massive protest on this court case, bring more attention to it. So when it falls through, people look into it and get angry and say, well, why did it fall through? You told us this is First Nations rights.
Or bring counter protesters with way better arguments and that act way more politely than they would ever do.
Yeah.
So it's not that convenient for them to have that many people or that much focus even on that. But now we're at the end of the Alberta Politics section, and I'll read your comments and then go into personalities.
We're going to go into Alberta personalities, but we're going to show two. I think we have one personality today. We took out the other one.
Yes.
It's an Irish individual, just so people kind of know where to get some information about what's going on the ground in Ireland. Although it's going to be hard to get it from him because he has been banned from YouTube.
Glengon says, wow, Jess, very nice, all the love. Yes. And Glengon also says, may have to change the name to Great Grand Prairie. Sam says, Ottawa is two as the Chiefs are to them.
Yeah.
Exactly. Harmony, hello Harmony, says, I watched the court case via Zoom from Edmonton today regarding the Indian tribes in Stay Free Alberta. It really makes me sick what goes on in the court system. JP Alberta first, thank you so much. And says, thank you so much for the $20 super chat, and says, historically, regular government elections have 40 to 60% voter turnout. Independent separation referendums of big issues, for example, Brexit, usually have 80 to 90% voter turnout.
Yeah, but the problem is the nationalists in Alberta aren't that set on it. There is a small group that are set on it, but the moderates here, they're not motivated one way or the other at this point. And most of them, if they are leaning one way, they're leaning towards independence. And if they don't want to vote for it, they're most likely going to stay home. So I think what the big advantage for Alberta independence here is their willingness to get out and vote. You're going to see a 90 to 100% turnout rate for everybody that wants to vote for independence. You're going to see people that are in remote camps take the day off of work and drive into town to vote. But the other big thing is that people aren't that motivated to vote against it because of what the national government has been doing and the direction Canada is going.
Exactly. Glenn Gunn says, I heard it was a clown show. Oh, sorry. I finished reading Harmony's message. Says, it really makes me sick what goes on in the court system. And that is why I'm slightly afraid, even if it is in Alberta, about the decision in the end, because of the types of arguments that usually should make no sense and should not even be valid arguments, but that they are bringing in.
Yeah, but we prepared for a backup strategy to that. We have a safety net. We've gotten the votes certified and accounted for, so we know we've hit that 188,000 threshold. And that's going to be a lot of media going against First Nations. Everybody knows how flimsy this case actually is.
Tall Talks, hello, says, how do you get Nat? And the guy, hello. And Sean asks, but then paid so he could ask, did you guys hear Leah Galson discuss the budget cuts in Canada of the MMIW, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to say the whole acronym, but the alphabet soup people.
Yeah, we're going into it when we get to
Alberta's Canada.
Alberta's Canada.
Primors 007 says the main difference with Ireland and Canada is that the Irish actually have pride. Canada has no pride. But and that's the thing. Some of them have been the self-imposed guilted out of being proud, even in Ireland, although there's still some people. And again, most of the, as we've said before, most of the actual patriots of Canada are now patriots of Alberta, and they are the ones that want to try to preserve that patriotism within.
It takes less than 5% of a population for a revolution. So what I would say about Ireland, I know a ton of Irish people just from teaching jiu-jitsu as well as just working at Irish bars. And it's half of them are patriots, half of them are literally globalists. And that's the way it breaks down. And the country has been flooded with migrants, so they're losing their voting power within the country. But because the ones that are patriots are so hard-nosed patriots and really willing to go to the mat for it, maybe they still have a chance. At least I hope they do.
Primers 007 says, not anymore anyways. And Glenn Gunn says, oh, Canada has too much pride parade. Exactly. And that's the issue. Tall Talks, thank you so much. Says, showed your stream on X again. Thank you so much. And it really does help.
And thank you for everybody that is sharing us out to other platforms. It really does help. There is a lot of censorship going on within Alberta Independence on YouTube specifically.
David Bird says, another great show. Gracias. Gracias to you for being here. And Robinson says, hi, Ned and the guy. Great show. Thank you. Hold on, let me read some Mario and Bailey ones just so they know I'm not ignoring them. Christos says, hello, dears. Alberta Independence, listening to your show on my phone while still at work.
Oh.
Good luck and hope
Good
you
luck
finish
at work there.
soon. Rusty Wiener says, the common thread is how our legal system under the crown has been corrupted. There is no king. The power lays with the unelected bureaucrats.
Absolutely. Okay, we'll go really quick into Alberta politics.
No, we just went there.
Oh, sorry. Alberta personalities, but today it's an Irish personality because of what's going on in Ireland. And then we're going to get into national Canadian politics as it's related to Alberta.
Yes.
But they need to understand that Albertans are done, we're leaving, and there's no more conversation to be had. I know that's upsetting to people.
So yes, not fully Alberta, but again, stays within the sentiment anyways.
And I've been watching this young kid for a long time since he was a young kid. He's starting to become a bit older now, but he is an intellectual as well as he's on the ground doing reporting and just trying to raise a voice to what has been happening in Ireland for well over a decade now.
This is Keith Woods on Subversion and Foreign. His name is Keith Woods on Subversion and Foreign Journalists covering Irish protests in 2025.
And he can be extremely hard to find on YouTube. He's been banned. He has another show where he doesn't use his own name anymore. He's easy to find on X though.
Yeah, I mean, look, if Ezra Levant or some of these people want to come and film the protests and put it on Rebel News and send it to a big audience, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that in principle. I do take issue with this trend you see where outsiders come in and try and frame this in ways that are more friendly to their narrative in terms of, obviously, a lot of these kind of conservative media platforms don't really favor ethnic, racial nationalism, so they try and make it a civic nationalism thing that says all about illegal immigration. Whereas, as we alluded to earlier, what's really driving the influx of numbers and the change in this country is legal immigration, far more than illegal immigration. You see those kinds of narratives seeping in, or they'll say that the left-wing counter-protests or pro-Hamas, pro-Palestine protests, they'll really zero in on that and try and make it this culture war issue of like it's Israel versus Palestine, it's people that are against illegal immigration versus the far left. No, it's about mass migration. So, yeah, like I said, whoever wants to come and film, that's great, but the core kind of narrative of what's going on here shouldn't be lost.
Yeah, and fantastic. That's Keith Woods. I highly recommend him following him as a content creator. He's gone through a couple bans and been kicked off of platforms, then come back. He's not extremely controversial now. He does interview extremely controversial people, though.
And we can see, because there were protests in Ireland, there have been for a while now regarding the exact same issues that he pointed out there. And here he is from a while ago saying that there was well over 1,000 protesters at the City West Hotel where he was filming.
Yeah, this was quite a while ago, but again, he does do on-the-ground reporting as well, which is fantastic.
The protest at City West Hotel, where a migrant, an asylum seeker that was supposed to be deported, stayed in the country and raped a 10-year-old Irish girl was in state care. As you can see, things are massively kicking off here. There's probably well over 1,000 protesters. Fortunately, it's the first time we've seen like this even in the last year or two. So things are really reaching a boiling point here.
Okay.
And again, if already with the UK ones and what's happening in the UK gets extremely censored and the information doesn't fully come out, again, they were able to cover it up for 20 plus years, what was actually happening through the mostly legal but also illegal immigration of people with different cultural values. Then in Ireland, it's even less known that is almost the exact same situation happening there, and they're able to cover it even further with legislation like hate speech that they brought in years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, again, that's Keith Woods. If you want to know what's going on the ground in Ireland, he's an absolute great source. He's also an intellectual that does a lot of debates and a lot of interviews and tries to focus in on a lot about mass migration that's happening in the EU as well as Ireland in the legal context.
Let me just read a few really quickly before we go into the next one, because the next one will take a while. So before I can get back to
a lot of the big news of the day is in national Canadian politics as it relates to Alberta, and that is the next section.
Yes, Taltalk says freedom for Alberta and as soon as possible. Yes, Troglodyte says the dancing mania, the Tarantilla dance was named after it. Exactly. Somebody knows what I'm talking about. Glenn Gunn says, I have to go watch my truckers. Take care. And he's referring to that show that's going on with Tamara Litch and Chris Barber. Again, if you're going to go watch it, you can always either come back or come back later. And all of the chapters are marked out once the video goes up for replay. And we won't take it personally. Don't worry. We'll also watch them once we're done. Primors 007 says, please, Nat, it's okay. I made it. No need to cry. Thank you. I'll stop crying. crying now. Gerald Robinson says, hit the like button. And yes, that really does help us out. So thank you so much. And let me just do a few from RUMBLE because I feel bad that they talk so much. Krista says, I will push hard in the new Republic of Alberta for every fit, able-bodied man after high school to have to go through at least the basic military training.
Yes, absolutely.
And we've talked about that quite a few times. Rusty says, what do you make of the... Okay, hold on. They're asking each other things. Krista says, upon completion, they should get to take home the rifle they trained with, and every year after, the government should issue free ammunition for a day of range practice.
Yeah.
Good policy. Maybe bring it up once the forming of the nation starts. But now let's actually go to more reasons for Alberta to become independent, which is Alberta's Canada. We named it that way because Alberta just props up the rest of Canada.
Yep.
I'm angry. I've had enough of these people.
Starting with, of course,
Mark Carney.
Yes. National Post says, quote, the latest budget forecasts annual deficits in excess of $55 billion through 2029, to 2030, and puts forward no timeline to balance that budget. And they want to continue to go with the ridiculous projects like the train.
And this was what he was able to get in with a minority government. Imagine where he's going. We're going to look at $100 billion, I would say minimum. Now that he has a majority, he's going to up everything to $100 billion. I wouldn't be surprised if he can have some kind of national emergency and go up to $1 trillion and declare a national emergency so he can spend his heart's content, which will put the Canadian economy in the ground at that point.
But also having these types of deficits also gives him a great excuse to either join or connect further with other powers like either the EU or China, and to allow even further foreign investment to come in, even though I would say Canada's almost has tried to max itself out in that respect.
I've been talking about this for quite a while now about Canada. Every day it seems like there's a new story, inch by inch by inch. There's a new poll, a new story about Canada aligning with the EU. Over the last couple of days, X has been flooded with mainstream media writing massive articles about this. Let's go into one of them if we can.
Hold on. We're not going to that yet.
Oh, it's not yet. Okay.
No. We're going to the BBC coming in with actual commentary about what happened with the floor crossing. People's Party of Canada saying, quote, another Conservative just crossed the floor to join the Liberals, and they still tell you the PPC is a problem because we split the vote. No, the real problem is a UNIPARTY that says one thing, then governs the same way. If you want more of the same, keep voting for it. If you want real change, vote your values. Vote for Alberta independence, I would say, after that last line.
We're going to have somebody, a clip later about a PPC member kind of talking about this. PPC is not splitting the vote. If they did, they would have had him on stage in the debates. Instead, they banned him. If they were really splitting the votes, they would have wanted to put him on the stage with Pierre Poilievre to try to split that Conservative vote. That's why it's very obvious they're not there to split the vote. They were the real danger. And this is why you didn't have that same rise like in other countries of the right wing. You had milquetoast right wing Conservative slowly going further and further left.
To where it's most beneficial to those that are already in power and not the citizens themselves behaving almost in the same way as the Liberals.
Well, if after Erin O'Toole, they didn't have the rise of Pierre Poilievre and said they would have had another Erin O'Toole, I think you would have really seen the rise of the PPC there. Yeah. Having Poilievre come in at that time, I think really shut down any hopes for the PPC. And it's a shame because a lot of their core values they had before they were popular, and they were the right one now that we can see 10 years later.
Let's see Aaron Gunn's opinion on the BC Conservative leadership. Jared Yager says, Aaron Gunn says the first BC Conservative leadership debate left him feeling much more optimistic that the party will be led by a true Conservative.
Are you afraid that the party could shift a little bit too far to the left and towards the Liberal end of things?
Well, that's what leadership races are all about, but I feel much more optimistic after the leadership race tonight. I think everybody held their own. I thought it was a very substantive debate. Lots of great answers on policies, from housing to the opioid epidemic to actually getting out to develop our resources, and of course, fixing the issues with DRIPA and Indigenous reconciliation.
And it was a horrible debate. I'm just going to say it straight up. I watched 90% of it this morning, and it took quite a while to watch it, and I was disappointed. Every conservative had the exact same answer. They did it just like the Liberal debate. They had little paddles, yes or no, do I support it? Every single time they asked a question, it was yes, yes, yes. They all had the same answer. There was no point to asking those questions. They needed to ask questions where they were going to get different answers or have the candidates engage with each other even more. But the candidates themselves had very pre-canned answers. They were very in the box politicians. They didn't have anybody there that was going to really push outside of that. Anytime the question was asked, they would answer just that question rather than trying to add on to the question to put pressure on other candidates like a Donald Trump would sometimes do, or maybe a Maxime Bernier or something like that. The debate structure itself was very boring. Now, it wasn't as biased as a Liberal outfit doing it was, so I can't appreciate that. But this is Juno News. They need to understand you need to bring a little bit of entertainment into these debates. Have each candidate square off for a one-on-one 15-minute debate. You have 4 candidates, so you have the first round, and then the winners from the first round can go to the second round, something like that. Rebel News, I think, understands entertainment and news a little bit better. The reason entertainment and news is a little bit important. You see what's happening in the EU. There was a YouTuber that crossed over that got into politics, and he was able to engage the masses and get all these non-voters to come out and start paying attention to debates, politics, and things like that, because he didn't give pre-canned answers. He would answer the question and then ask a question to his running mate. A lot of these people didn't want to bring up other politicians' names because the rules were if you bring up the other politician's name, they get to respond to it. And they don't want to give them any more time. Take the risk. Do something engaging so I'm going to remember you. None of the people on stage were memorable. Aaron Gunn did do a fine job with what he was dealt with, but everything was very in the box.
But also it's important in nowadays context, I will say, with social media, content creators, etc., that it sounds dumb to say, yes, entertainment is important for a democracy, but as the great Rush Limbaugh used to say, politics is downstream from culture. And at the same time, you want an engaged citizenry if you want the types of democracy that we're looking for, at least the types of freedom that we're looking for to actually work. If the citizens have all become disenfranchised and don't even care about what happens, then we see situations like we're seeing in Canada, in Ireland sometimes, where a few do understand or are trying to do something about it, but the rest will try to even fight against them because they're not properly informed. So if to get more, especially younger people, properly informed, all it takes is to entertain them as well, then that would also be a great point for entertainment is valuable to a democracy or to voting or to at least the knowledge of the citizenry when they go out and vote.
Well, at least they were all true conservatives, or at least that's what it seemed like with their values. It was just very blah. The one question that came up that I thought was controversial was, do you think people with PR and not citizenship should be able to vote? Everyone answered yes, except for the one candidate on the end, which was the older bald gentleman, which was he had no experience in politics. And I think the other 3 knew they didn't want to isolate that voter block. That's a shame, because if you have PR, you should not be able to vote. It's a reward to become a citizen to be able to vote in an election.
Yes, because you're actually invested in the country enough that you go through the whole citizenship process to become a citizen.
Yeah.
And only citizens should be imbued with the ability to change the country itself.
Well, and I think non-citizens can appreciate that.
Yeah. Here I am. One that still isn't one. I was going to say something else. Oh, in BC in particular as well, we have seen the attempt to consolidate and continue to create new and different amalgamations of conservative parties and them joining forces and etc. But we did see something very similar that happened within Alberta, and that doesn't really lead anywhere either.
Yeah.
And it just muddles policies and muddles values.
Potentially, but if there's some kind of deal or some kind of understanding that if there's a bunch of smaller conservative parties and we are a coalition, meaning we'll vote together once we gain power, but we want to be able to represent our individual districts in a very specific way.
Speaking of Ryan Gertison says, quote, all the floor crossers are doing is undermining people's already cynical views on elections and the integrity of politicians. And it is particularly that cynic view that makes many not even want to be engaged and then come into news like this and be completely surprised that this happened because they have become so disengaged and now don't care to have the information as it's happening, just get shocked when it does happen.
Because of Marilyn Gladue, a Conservative MP.
Here's Marilyn Gladue as a Conservative back in 2023.
Our leader has been supportive of this bill all the way along. I want to thank him for that.
It is a great pleasure.
Cut to today.
I'm very happy to be the newest member of our new Liberal government.
And he really does look like Mr. Burns right here, especially put next to the giant lady in red.
It's tiny.
Which is the floor crosser, obviously.
Partisan defection that enrages Conservatives as the Prime Minister casts it as a country coming together to his side.
This all comes at a time when the country as a whole is uniting to move forward, and it's important that over there we unite.
As Alberta is trying to separate, mind you.
To move forward as well.
Pierre Poilievre tweeted, Gladue said that floor crossers should face voters in a by-election. I could not agree more. As recently as January, she told her local paper, we elected you under this banner, and if you don't want to be under that banner, then we deserve a chance to have a redo of the election.
And pause it.
Sarnia's.
And I would say an equivalent to Pierre Poilievre crossing the floor, because he doesn't go up for an election now for 3 years, is if he goes against Alberta independence and they call him in and tap him on the shoulder, say, we need you to go against Alberta independence. I understand he's a national politician. He has nothing to gain at this point. If he goes against Alberta independence, he's as good as a floor crosser to me at this point. I could have understood it somewhat if there was going to be a snap election or something like that, but there's not. So if he goes at it now,
is a border town that's known for oil refineries and some manufacturing connected to the auto sector. Some constituents here are not happy.
We thought absolutely no way would she cross. So now I'm wondering, why did she cross? What did Carney give her? And explain it to your constituents.
Most Conservatives felt that way today, that Gladue would be the last to make a move like this.
Look at her social media feed. Up until just hours ago, she was trashing and attacking the Liberal government of which she's now proudly a part. This is very cynical and it's very odd.
But the red clothing at the photo op and broad smiles right inside the Prime Minister's office, another body blow to Tories.
I like the almost sarcastic thing they said at the end. Another body blow. In this case, yeah, she's very big.
Yeah.
But we had talked about the interview between Keith Wilson and Glenn Beck, and now there seems to be at least more of it.
And they talked about other subjects. Right here, I believe in the beginning, the part that we're going to show, they were talking about firearms and things like that. So very interesting interview. I highly do recommend it.
And we've talked a lot about how good it is, particularly that people within the Alberta independence movement that can speak to the issues and can explain it to an audience that maybe doesn't know anything about it, like Glenn Beck's audience maybe, are very important, especially to go towards a more US but also international media space, independent media space, to let people know what's actually going on. We're seeing that, I mean, maybe a lot of you didn't even know what was going on in Ireland, and because we're speaking about it now, you know what's happening.
And let's just remember the CRTC is going to have a lot of say on what can be and not be said coming out of Canada. That's why it's very important if they are able to censor Alberta independence, and that's the subject they want to censor coming out from Canadian content creators, which I think may be the case in the summertime, especially after Carney gets the majority. If Alberta independence content creators go on other people's shows, they're not going to be able to censor that.
Mm-hmm.
Keith Wilson from Canada, Canadian attorney, to talk a little bit about Albertans and also the gun grab that is going on. Keith, welcome.
Glenn, thanks for having me on.
So I would have never guessed that Canada would actually, I don't know, elect a bunch of officials that would say, hey, all those guns that you used to have, we're now going to come and collect them. And then actually kind of talk about going door to door. I mean, they don't have the people to do that. How are they going to grab these guns from people?
I don't know, but it's very frightening, obviously. I mean, the reality is the Liberal government in Ottawa has brought in these crazy laws designating otherwise legal hunting rifles, sport shooting rifles, etc., to be prohibited weapons. First, they gave us a grace period, as you mentioned, so we were allowed to keep them in our gun safes, but we couldn't take them out. Then they implemented, which just included a buyback program where they would give us a little bit of money if we all showed up with our guns. They don't know, there's no registry, so they don't know who has the guns. So they wanted us to come forward and turn our guns into police stations, and that was a flop. Only 2% of the people did. So now we're all facing this deadline that if we don't turn in our guns by October 31st of this year, we will all be criminals and we will be charged and jailed for possession of a prohibited weapon. It's so many things, Glenn, that are happening north of your border are just so difficult to believe, but they're real. And there's a lot of trouble up in Canada, and that's why so many here in Alberta want to get out and form our own country and get away from this madness.
So, I mean, 2% of Canadians actually,
Okay, and we'll leave it there, but more clips are coming out. I'm not sure if you can find it on YouTube quite yet, but I highly recommend that interview. I'm glad Glenn Beck is shining a light on this to an American audience, and I hope more American content creators do this as this thing ramps up, because I'm sure Carney's bringing in mass censorship.
And also, speaking of not just the farmers in Ireland, and we've also talked about, for example, farmers in the Netherlands, etc. Now, very close to Alberta is BC, who are also fighting against insanity and attempts to make them stop what they've been doing, which is feeding people. Riley Donovan says, quote, tension rising in Vancouver Island's Cowichan Valley as residents fight back against mass rezoning of rural land that would restrict chickens, beekeeping, and livestock. The battle in this valley is part of the broader fight over the future of rural Canada, which they want to destroy.
They're going after Christianity in rural Canada through regulations. They're defunding a lot of the homeschooling, Christian homeschooling, what would you call it, blocks?
Programs? Projects?
What do you call a block? Pods, yeah.
When Casey Hickey and her husband found this 3-acre farm in Ladysmith, the mom of 2 thought her dreams had come true, to raise animals that could feed her family and offer horseback riding lessons to help pay the bills. But now, proposed changes to zoning in the Cowichan Valley Regional District that would dramatically restrict use without community consultation is threatening her family's future here.
It's scary. It's scary and it's really upsetting.
The proposed changes under the CVRD's comprehensive zoning bylaw would alter rural zoning in many areas, so her property on the outskirts of Ladysmith would not be allowed more than 6 backyard chickens.
We wouldn't be able to have enough chickens to feed my kids breakfast.
No roosters, no bees for pollination, or riding lessons or boarding of horses.
We moved here with such big dreams and such big goals, and to be told you can't do this and this and this and this, it stops everything. Read that, Gordy. Oh, Gord.
Cobble Hill's Kirsten Witt runs a small farm and equestrian facility that would not be allowed under the proposed zoning changes.
Back up. I just think it's really unfair, and it makes me upset because the kids can't come anymore.
So she organized a group of neighbors against the plan on Saturday, and by Sunday, it had reached 2,000 members.
There's a lot of people exactly like me that are thinking, what are we going to do? How are we going to pay our bills if we can't board a couple horses, if we can't have some chickens, if we can't sheep, goats?
They were shocked. And understandably so.
Ian Morrison is the Area F Director for the Cowichan Valley Regional District.
And it's not just happening with small farms, it's also happening with redistricting when they're building new cities. They're wanting to get rid of cars, so they're making sure there's no parking. We covered that story yesterday.
15 minutes.
They want to make sure people live in pods, own no real land. And if they do own that land because it's handed down to them, they want to regulate any self-sufficiency right out of their ability.
He is being flooded with messages from worried landowners who want to stop this plan before the changes are passed.
People don't want to see a lot of government in their affairs, and I've been standing up. I've been raising these issues with my colleagues, and nobody should be surprised that this level of outrage is happening now.
So Morrison is urging landowners to share their views and attend upcoming CVRD meetings, since there's still time to reshape the zoning changes that will affect the future of farming in the Cowichan Valley.
You're already so over-regulated in so many cities. There's going to be no way to change this because you're fighting a losing battle here. This is why Alberta independence is so important. It resets the entire system, gets rid of a lot of the unnecessary regulations, and puts in a system that says it will self-deregulate, hopefully.
But also, not only that, they want to take a hold of a lot of this property and this wrongly used land, according to them, because they want to use it themselves. I mean, the government, they want to take over those parts, but also going even deeper. And as you were saying, the the self-sufficiency that comes with being able to know how to feed yourself, how to tell the land, what to do with the land, that is big or small, also comes within the family values aspect of it all, on the parental rights aspect of it all, on the teaching and training your kids to do what you've been doing for the longest time, or because you want them to live a different life that does not involve a city, a 15-minute city, or anything that involves too much government regulation as we see in cities. So it is also another way to impede families and that self-sufficiency that usually is what helps people grow and foster families together. And now going to the crazy.
Oh, this is the story everybody was bringing up. And I had a couple clips, but I took the one away and we went with this one.
Divine L says, NDP, of course, Member of Parliament Leah Gazal.
And I was wrong. It was only 2 M's, not 3. I thought it was 3 for some reason.
Complaining that they provided $0 to deal with the ongoing, can't say that word on YouTube, but ending of alphabet soup.
What's the double Q now?
Questioning queer, I guess. Why do I know this? God. Okay, let's go.
When the budget was released, I was shocked to find out that Prime Minister Carney is cutting $7 billion between Indigenous Services Canada and Crown Indigenous Relations. They provided $0 to deal with the ongoing genocide of MMIW G2SLGBTQIA+.
She looks like she's having a misfire.
The reason a lot of the money was given in the first place was Trudeau had a freaking election and they thought it was going to stay in place. Mark Carney took that $7 billion and bought a couple floor crossers with it is what happened. And now she's wondering, where's my money?
Well, yeah, because they got used to gimme, gimme, gimme.
This is abhorrent. This is callous. This is callous because the very Liberal government that has stripped organizations of life-sustaining funding has now promised...
Life-sustaining funding, my ass. So many dollars go to the elites of these tribes and it doesn't trickle down. They don't build the infrastructure. They keep it in that one family, in the elites within the tribe.
And yet they can use their virtue signaling to continue to receive that money. And because they don't allow other members within the tribe to speak up about it, then they can continue.
Why isn't she calling out the elites in the tribe here? There should be a strong economy that has been built. There's been enough billions of dollars given over the last decade.
Committed $13 billion. $13 billion on military spending. Who is paying for it? Indigenous women across this country, Indigenous women, girls to us, LGBTQIA+, are not safe. In fact, rates of violence are increasing. And what is the Prime Minister doing? He is turning a blind eye on this violence. You know, the Prime Minister talks a lot about projects of national interest.
She's talking about the violence, and there have actually been some few studies that then got censored done about the violence within Indigenous communities in Canada. Guess who's doing most of that violence? That is what they don't fully talk about who's responsible because it's too uncomfortable to actually admit a lot of it is within, but then they come out with the numbers that they want to make shocking, but that they don't say who's actually perpetrating the violence because that goes against the narrative.
What is in the national interest are the lives, safety, security, and dignity, not in the national interest of Indigenous women and girls to us LGBTQIA+. Is the Prime Minister okay having Indigenous women to us LGBTQIA+ family members and organization coming to Parliament begging time and time again to see...
Because there's so much corruption on the reserve and they refuse to fix their own problems and build an actual economy. I mean, you were given billions of dollars and it didn't trickle down. And this is why a lot of Indigenous people within Alberta are going to vote for independence because they're fed up with getting the short end of the stick from their own tribe.
For humanity? Is he okay with that? Well, clearly, with his behavior the other day, laughing at a woman from Grassy Narrows who is suffering from mercury poisoning, having her even having to beg for an apology is an example of how this Prime Minister has turned his back on Indigenous peoples, particularly Indigenous women and girls to us LGBTQIA+. And what does that look like? It looks like rates of violence increasing.
And they need further virtue signaling, but also, I mean... complaining that they're cutting funding that they've been doing and providing for the longest time and where that funding goes.
He's giving funding. The thing is, they're not cutting funding.
But also we looked at the budget.
But they're not cutting funding. So I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
What's
But they're
happening is
complaining.
they took funding away specifically from that one little group of Indigenous women and gave it to other First Nations in different ways. There's so many programs and so much money going into that. The way they want to strip private property rights is through First Nations. That's why they're giving so many billions of dollars, so they can make sure they keep the elites in line.
But that virtue signal point specifically is no longer useful to the full narrative. And again, because they don't want to fully talk about who the perpetrators of most of that violence is. They just want to complain about it.
And last clip before we go
doesn't help fix things.
And last clip before we go to comments, and then we're going to go to Alberta as it's related to the world.
People's Party of Canada. There's just that.
Yeah, this gentleman puts it fantastically. It kind of is related to what we were talking about earlier with that PPC post.
Groundhog Day of purgatory that we're waiting on Canadians to become strong enough to stop trusting evil. It's not a battle between right and left, it's a battle between good and evil. Both of our major parties are corrupt and evil. They abandoned you during COVID and they wanted you force injected. The Conservative Party wanted to invoke emergency measures at the outset of COVID. They didn't even need us going to Ottawa to invoke emergency measures. They would have started with that. And their narrative is we're going to war with COVID. And anyone that doesn't want to take our injections, you're an enemy collaborator. They were pure evil, but you forgot about all that because you have fluffy little Pierre doing his little dance and getting all these paid influencers. You get it that they're paid to make the Conservative Party look conservative or populist or reminiscent of Trump in some way. It's a complete and utter lie and fabrication. This is what you get. You did a devil deal. You took a shortcut. You believe the fifth generation warfare that said, don't work towards what's true. That'll take a lot of work. You're not strong. You don't want to do a lot of work and commit to something for a long period of time. Here's a quick fix. Vote for the Conservative Party. Trust us. We won't betray you. Constant betrayal. Constant betrayal. And they had the nerve to tell you that PPC was working for the Liberals, man. They wanted to split the vote off the Conservative Party. If that theory was true, the Liberals control the election rules, and they wouldn't have rigged the election to keep Max Bernier out of the leadership debates. They would have loved him being in there, would have pulled so many votes away from Pierre Poilievre, because Max would have been talking about everything that the Overton window forbids Pierre from talking about. He would have said, why are we being carbon zero? We need to be carbon aggressive. We need to ditch all this bullshit that's bankrupting Canada, all these woke policies, all this meeting Paris targets, all these endless support of Ukraine and Israel. What the hell is that about? We don't even support ourselves right now. All of our hotels are turned into refugee encampments that cost us hundreds of millions of dollars every year, and we keep destroying ourselves. Max could have said all that, but it was the Liberals who kept him out of the debate. That is completely anathema to the theory that the Liberals need PPC as a way to split votes off the Conservatives. And the vote split argument implies that we're similar to the Conservatives. Obviously, the Conservatives are similar to the Liberals because they keep going over there. It's not a big move for them. Anyways, guys, this is exactly what you deserve for choosing evil, so don't do it. It's quite simple.
And it's a
Canadian
shame the
politics
PPC doesn't have more support in Canada. Just going by that, like, they've had the right policies right from the get, and they didn't compromise on them.
But again, it is now Alberta independence, I think, because because the PPC has, I mean, if the Conservatives right now have no chance, at least for the next 3 years, I would say even for the rest of time, the PPC has even less of a chance. Again, unfortunately.
PPC has a huge chance to go to move to Alberta and vote for independence. And this is my appeal to PPC voters across the nation of Canada. And that's why I put these clips in about the PPC today. There was 2 of them. If you're a PPC voter, you have no hope in any way, shape, or form or in winning any political power within national Canada. But within Alberta, there's a lot of like-minded individuals that a lot of those first principles that you believe in are believed in there too. And when the reset button is hit, there's going to be a big change coming.
Now we'll read some of your comments and then go into Alberta and the world, and Alberta within the broader context of the world. Justin GP says, I want to see full contact debate. You would like to see that too.
Yeah. The closest thing we have at this point is Andrew Wilson, but he can't open an olive jar, but I still like him.
Harmony Van says, it is so difficult to listen to the bureaucrats in the court system. Nothing was real while I was teaching except for the students. Listening to judges and the opposition is mind-boggling. And also says, I enjoy listening to real, authentic men or women, and are not what is said by some today. Jeff Rath was excellent.
Yeah, Jeff Rath was excellent. And Jeff Rath on that interview yesterday on The Fringe, man, he started out and he just started going off like a typical Jeff Rath style. It was fantastic to watch.
Steve Safaro says, I think Alberta will go towards an executive plus judicial system. That will be horrible if Carney has his judges pre-installed.
Yeah, we need to figure out some promises that we can make as a whole that we can guarantee that is going to be in the founding of Alberta, so we can appeal those promises to PPC members or to individual groups, whether it's teachers that don't like what the teachers unions are doing. How's the education system going to work? If we had a better idea of how things are going to kind of shake out, we could make more substantial promises to a lot of different individual groups who are all willing to either vote for it within Alberta or move to Alberta and vote for Alberta independence. PPC members are one of those groups 100%, and so are National Conservatives.
However, yesterday, Mitch Sylvester did raise a point about having to further look into people moving and what the regulations of elections.
No, Jeff Rath cleared that up.
Okay.
Yeah, on the same interview.
Okay. Dara Robinson says, Liberal Conservative, they're the same. The LibCon or UNIPARTY, Alberta Independence is the only way. Get on board the Freedom Train.
Yeah. And Jeff Rath had cleared that up yesterday and said if you are moving to Alberta to vote in it, just look into what the provincial policies are. And as long as you can vote in a provincial election, that's the same regulation that dictates whether you can vote in the referendum.
Okay. Harmony says, wasting time and money on nonsense. Yes. Sean says, oh, there she is. And then asks, how do you genocide murdered people? Exactly. And again, they don't want to talk about the actual issues that is causing a lot of those issues that are at the same time being exploited for both virtue signaling, but also to get money.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate too.
Well, and I don't see like...
that they're using the suffering of these women.
I also don't see how the PPC members... they've been the most hard-nosed. They're some of the most conservative, and they actually supported a party even though they had no chance of winning. There's actual hope in Alberta. I'd be surprised if they don't move en masse.
Justin GP says she wants that $7 billion so she can add another letter to the alphabet. Maybe that's what each one of those costs, probably.
Yeah.
Alphabet soup. Bradley Wilcox says, love watching you guys mention you in the Unacceptable Fringe chat the other night. Thank you so much for mentioning us. It really does help. And again, we are attempting to get interviews with a bunch of people as well. So that actually helps. Thank you.
Yeah, we're interviewing, I think, Homes with the Homes this weekend. Home with Homes. And then we have another interview set up for next weekend. And we already interviewed Marty up north. So we're going to release that on Sunday. I just made the thumbnail. Thumbnail looks great.
I have some...
You have nothing to say about it.
We have creative differences. No. If you notice, there's... two different versions of thumbnails we've had. One is mine, and one is clearly his.
The good ones are mine, obviously.
The newest ones are his. That I guess they have worked thus far, but very different creatively than you were.
Okay, let's continue on.
Bradley Wilcox said, "Oh no, I read that one." Sean, why is it not working? Sean says, "Jess, she added like 6 already letters, 6 more." Primrose 007 says, "You know, she sat in front of the mirror and practiced that stupid alphabet." Ish. Sam says supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Yeah, I said it right. Just rolls off the tongue, says Sean. Bradley says, oh, I read that one already, but thank you so much. Oh, hold on. Okay, now let me read the rest of the message. Mentioned this channel in the Unacceptable Fringe show the other night and told him you support his channel as well, and he said thank you, Nan and the guy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sean says,
yeah, and we do support the channel because we actually moved our time slot so we wouldn't conflict with his. We can't move it for every show, but he is doing a live show 3 times a week, and I mean we do a live show 6 days a week. I don't know too many other people doing live shows on a regular basis right now, so if we are the 2 main live shows, it's important we don't conflict.
Yeah.
Our show should roll right into his. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, sometimes we go a little bit later because he doesn't have a show on those days.
I also like anybody just covering Alberta independence and the issues within it, because again, we won't get to all the issues and we might have even different opinions and different ideas. So that is also important to acknowledge. Sean says Pierre eating apples was a distraction too. Does anyone remember those clips from Pierre? Edward says the wrath of wrath. Is coming.
And that's the great thing about Wrath. He's completely opposite of Keith Wilson, and it really is the wrath of wrath.
But they play off each other very well.
They do.
And I think they are good together as well. But let's go into Alberta and the world, and then I'll continue. Well, I read all your chats, but I'll read any that come in during that. starting with, oh God, getting right into it. From Nick Sortor, quote, President Trump will be discussing withdrawing for the U.S. from NATO this afternoon with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. They were tested and they failed. Said Trump, it's time. NATO needs the U.S., but the U.S. doesn't need them.
Yeah, and they did talk. Rubio came out with them. Some things have come out since this, but Trump wants to pull out of the Strait of Hormuz, and he's telling NATO, if you don't go in there and we can help secure, we can leave some assets behind, but it's going to fall on your shoulders because you're the primary beneficiary of that oil. If they don't want to do it, China's going to come in there and take it over, or Iran and Oman are going to keep charging that $2 million toll for every boat that comes out of there. We're going to have an article in a minute about that toll, and it's very interesting.
And on NATO, can you tell me, is the United States still considering withdrawing from NATO? Is that still a possibility?
It's something the president has discussed, and I think it's something the president will be discussing in a couple of hours with Secretary General Rutte, and perhaps you'll hear directly from the president following that meeting later this afternoon. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, and he doesn't actually have the power to pull out of NATO. He needs 2/3 of Congress. There's too big of a uniparty, but he can pull out all the money, all the funding, and just stick to the letter of NATO and go not a step over that. That will collapse, will begin the collapse of NATO all on its own. So, and it's very important to realize, he's trying to tell them right now, you have to step up. If you want to secure the strait, that you're the one getting all the oil from it, we'll help you and leave some assets. But as of right now, you're expecting us to secure it, and that's not going to be the case. A lot of what he did over there is putting a lot of pressure on Europe, a lot of pressure on the UK, and that's where all the globalists are. So I don't mind to see it.
And exactly that is where all the globalists are. And we've brought this point up over and over again about the potential of Canada wanting to join the EU. We even made a video about it, and we got called insane by people. But we continue to see articles trying to push this narrative over and over again. From the Globe and Mail, quote, this is an opinion, Canada would win some and lose some if it joined the EU.
And this is the full article. We're not going to click into it. I just want to read the headline. Every couple days, there seems to be a new article coming out. I already have another one for tomorrow's show that's really in depth, but absolutely crazy. They're really trying to push this thing forward step by step. It's going to take a little while, but they're trying to build the propaganda right now, right in front of our eyes.
And again, the EU is basically going bankrupt. I mean, most of the countries within it are not doing well, some worse than others, but Canada might bring in the potential of a lot of natural resources if it joins the EU. And again, there are mechanisms by which they could even attempt to do it, even with the rules the EU currently has. And then Mark Carney could release the valve on all of those natural resources, which is why Alberta needs to escape before they try to use everything within Alberta too.
Well, there's two things going on here at once. They're nudging Canada and the EU closer and closer and closer. Well, at the same time, they have these huge land grabs, whether it's the 30 by 30 program, and then eventually that's going to turn into the tokenization and blockchain of natural resources that the government will then control. Or the land grabs within British Columbia to the First Nations. Again, they will be able to tokenize it and go around a lot of legislation because it would be the First Nations that own that. And then they can drain the coffers into the EU globalist pockets. You see both things kind of going on simultaneously in a very slow manner. It's going to speed up once Mark Carney gets a majority government here. And we talk about this quite frequently. There's a possibility there won't be a massive pushback against Alberta independence. Now, I don't want to plan for that, but Alberta would be the one to build the framework to resist the national government. You take Alberta out of that, even though they have a lot of money, the other provinces just aren't going to resist, and it's going to be very easy to federalize absolutely everything.
I was bringing this up because, again, furthering what we just said, from Melissa, quote, Carney just put out a statement with the European Council about the 2-week ceasefire. Seems like becoming part of the EU is inching closer. And this was released on the 8th of April, so yesterday. Statement by President Macron, Prime Minister Meloni, Chancellor Merz, Prime Minister Starmer, again, all of these, Starmer also not technically within the EU, Prime Minister Carney, Prime Minister Frederiksen, Prime Minister Jetten, Prime Minister Sanchez from Spain, who is insane, President of the European Commission, von der Leyen, and President of the European Council, Costa. We welcome the 2-week ceasefire concluded between the United States and Iran today. We thank Pakistan and all partners involved for facilitating blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, again, another step closer.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't made a video in a while. That's why the last video on our edited video channel is the EU Canada one.
So you can go see us talk about the insanity of this plan.
Although it was somewhat of a bad video.
We made it. But we continue to talk about it because it seems to be becoming even more relevant now.
Yeah.
However, Peter St. says progressives are removing themselves from the gene pool. Unfortunately, their public schools have fewer kids and they want to use them because they need somebody to indoctrinate. Benny Johnson says census data shows that red states are having a baby boom. Blue states are collapsing in population. Blue state populations continue to collapse as third world legal and illegal migrants plunge under Trump, while red America is fostering growing families.
Well, and they're trying to get rid of homeschooling, and especially certain kinds of homeschooling, like religious homeschooling. It's being completely defunded. They're making homeschooling illegal in a lot of the EU and the UK as we speak. If it's not already banned in certain EU countries, they're trying to broaden it out. I wouldn't be surprised if Canada is the next to try to implement that. They need their indoctrination centers to indoctrinate your children.
And they already have a lot of sway. I mean, the unions already have a lot of sway, but even within the Canadian education system, they already have imposed a lot of restrictions on homeschooling for students that are homeschooled to be able to even graduate.
Yeah.
So that's already in place. And it's very dangerous if younger people can think freely and for themselves and have critical thinking, which has been completely trained out of the ones that go to public school. One of the other reasons why I wanted to escape Canada, because to have kids, I wanted to be able to homeschool without the impositions placed already by the government.
Yeah.
Again, I worked into high school, so I kind of did look into it quite a bit in Vancouver, which is insane. Marinafo says, breaking. Senior Iranian sources say that under the new ceasefire, Iran will allow no more than 15 ships per day through the Strait of Hormuz. Before the war, the Strait of Hormuz typically saw around 130 to 138 ships pass through per day.
Yeah, so how this toll is supposed to work, when you come into the strait, you pay the toll, and that allows you to leave. So only a certain number are going to be going in. That's supposed to be 15. That's going to be a huge decrease in the amount of oil that's coming out of that region. So this does not look good for the EU or the UK right now. And if they want to change this, it's going to be on their shoulders at this point.
Especially it doesn't look good because they essentially stripped down all of their productive industries and anything that could make them self-sufficient and again, going back to Alberta independence, Alberta is one of the few that would be able to self-sustain and even thrive within a self-sustaining mechanism.
Well, a lot of people don't realize they bombed their own pipeline, which was the Nord Stream 2. They still have multiple other pipelines to Russia. Russia is not the one that turned them off. They said they'll turn them back on at any time. All the EU has to do is kind of play nice there. In order to not completely deindustrialize, they have an easy solution. They have a partner that's willing to play ball right next to them, but they put so much Russia derangement syndrome into their people. That's not an option anymore. They want World War III. They want to wait Trump out. They want to make sure that Ukraine war continues until the next U.S. president comes in, because Russia holds $74 trillion of natural resources that the EU has been planning on taking and floating their civilization for the next 100 years.
And they also want to wait Trump out because, from my next quote, Trump said, deadline for NATO, the alliance has 2 days. The U.S. is demanding concrete plans from allies to secure shipping after the Iran ceasefire. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte flew to Washington amid Trump's frustration. The alliance had previously refused to join the mission. So far, only talks are underway, but the U.S. has already boosted its military presence and expects clear commitments. And they also don't like Trump in the U.S. because he has been looking at the whole situation and at NATO with very different eyes than the alliances they used to have with all the rest of the presidents of the U.S.
Well, if we see a major decrease in the amount of oil that's coming out of the Strait of Hormuz, or it's completely shut down, or China takes it over, what you're going to see is American oil become very valuable. And that's a guaranteed another pipeline from Alberta going to the United States. So America's going to love to have that because they already buy the oil at a decreased rate. So it's nothing but profit into their pockets. And they have good relations with Danielle Smith and all of Alberta, whether it's independent or it's not independent. But independence that just guarantees even more wealth for Alberta and guaranteed wealth. If Canada gets all but hurt and doesn't want to do any trade relations with Alberta, which, I mean, what would BC become at that point?
And I'm sure a lot of you already, probably most of you already have, but if you haven't signed the petition and there's still time, we do have the link in the description down below. I forgot to say it at the top of the show,
okay.
But you can go find the locations there and sign as soon as possible so you don't stay trapped within the insane asylum.
Yeah, absolutely. And just remember, like, if you sign the petition, I'm all for independence. I don't want negotiations. I think it's too far gone. I think the system's too far rigged. If you compromise now, you're going to be thinking you're going to get a pipeline or some natural resource contracts. But in 10 years, the amount of regulation that's going to be on you, you're going to realize you should have voted for freedom. But just signing the petition does give Danielle Smith a lot more room to work with when it comes to negotiations to build the safety net in case Alberta independence, the vote doesn't go the way that we want.
Bradley Wilcox says, I think you guys should do a collab. Believe me, we're reaching out to a bunch of people that we'd love to interview or talk with about Alberta independence.
Yeah, we've been reaching out. I got a list of about 100.
It gets longer and longer.
Go to my camera if you can. That board right there opens up and it's a big whiteboard, and I got 100 names on there of U.S. content creators, Alberta content creators that we want to talk about Alberta independence with. We reach out to about 5 a day, just so we're not overwhelmed and we can keep up with things and then schedule everybody in.
Exactly. But yes, thank you. Sean says Apple spell check is broken. I mean, it seems like it with that lady. DeBilver says, I'm guessing WTF is what's going to happen in Canada. Might become European. Sean says, I can only imagine the epic level of inflation that would occur once Canada adopts the euro. It would impoverish Canadians on an extraordinary level, further than they already are.
I don't necessarily know if that would be the case. It's the big trap. We've covered on the show, so maybe a lot of people don't know because it's been a while since we covered it. I forgot the exact date, but they're bringing in complete digital currency within the EU. They thought they had the digital currency that was going to be the global digital currency, meaning every other digital currency was originally supposed to flow into the EU, and that's how they were going to fund themselves. Donald Trump has completely undermined that system, and in multiple ways. Number one, he's making stable coins so EU citizens can now pick a form of digital currency outside of their own system, which will completely undermine the digital euro. But the digital euro is also going to be very programmable, and I'm sure they're going to have very authoritarian rules on you have to use this currency within the EU. So it's going to be very interesting what happens there.
Yeah.
But because it's going to be digital, they can print as much or as little as they want. They're not going to be subject to inflation. They can then program what you can use it for. They can also program the currency so your bank account will go to zero or it will start draining itself if you don't spend your money by a certain amount of time. So they can force money into the economy from the citizens. And this is all in the documents for their digital currency. And this is how you know all this.
Tyler Robinson says United Nations is in financial troubles also. Exactly. And the U.S. did try to attempt to pull out a bunch of different UN things. They weren't able to pull out of all of them, all of the ones they wanted to, but at least a few that were pretty significant.
Yeah. If J.D. Vance gets in next, he's going to continue down that same path. So
Sean says, but if Canada joins the EU, wouldn't that mean that USA could join the EU too? EU as a global currency? I think they would want to. At least not right now. Again, if a Gavin Newsom comes in, maybe the push could start to do that.
Oh, that would be horrible.
Like, I wouldn't put it past that.
We recommended Tom Longo, Prometheus Action Group, as well as Martin Armstrong on the channel before. And even the Democrats have been pulling away from the EU banking system. And the EU banking system is how they keep a lot of controls on everything. So the American system has gotten a lot more control over itself over the last specifically 6 years.
Yeah, DeBilver says here in Canada, they're bringing the Chinese army too. Exactly. And they're also getting closer and closer to China.
Yeah.
Communist China. Troglodyte says Abby just announced they're funding a Christian homeschooling network, so it's here.
That's the one I was actually talking about today. And they're doing the same thing with churches that don't. If you're a church and you don't support abortion, they're taking away your nonprofit status as well, and any funding that you're getting from the government, which is crazy because that's a fundamental principle. That should be of Christian churches, but I guess not all Christian churches, not the government approved ones.
Plus the ones they're burning.
Yeah.
It's like if they're not defunding them, they're letting them get burnt to the ground. Justin GP says, Money Up North interview will be published Sunday, I think. Yes, this Sunday it will be published. I'll make sure of it. I'll stay up late if I have to. Sean says, every country who switched to the euro had high inflation levels. Imagine something that costs $1 Canadian becoming €1. How many Canadian dollars to a euro? Close to 2 to 1. And that would be even further. I don't know what he's looking for. That would be.
I'm looking for the UFO thing because we only have a couple stories for RUMBLE, and that one was good. Oh, here, I found it.
Oh, good.
Okay, so we have the UFO story in the Yukon for RUMBLE.
Anybody interested in that can come over to RUMBLE with us. And I mean, do you have anything to say on the inflation that would happen if Canada took the euro? Because every single other country that took the euro did result in massive inflation because now imagining how $1 Canadian would become €1. And now it's almost 2 to 1.
No, because we're currently in the transition phase where certain countries are going to go to complete digital currency and complete authoritarian control over their citizens. The documents have already been laid out. The EU set a hard date on that. I can't remember it was 2027 or 2028. Once they have that, it's more about control and less about how much the dollar is actually worth. They're trying to create internalized controls and an internalized economy.
Sean asks, Bigfoot flying the UFO guy?
No, oil workers.
Don't get him started.
Oil workers spotted a UFO. Bad language on that clip, so we'll save it for the last clip on RUMBLE, though.
And also, insane. Okay, whatever. Justin GP says, I'll see you all on your Bumble. That's a good way to say it now. Thank you. Maybe I'll pronounce it that way now, so YouTube doesn't get angry that we're funneling people over to elsewhere where we can talk freely. But we are heading over to RUMBLE or Bumble, I guess. Bumble. It's the same username, Nat and the Guy. You can find us there. We have 3 stories now, I guess, with the UFO one. So we'll see you over there. Thank you so much for being here. Before you go over to RUMBLE, please do subscribe. It's the thing that helps us out the most here on YouTube. But there'll be a 30-second wait screen, and then you'll see us over there.
Oh, and thank you to JP and everybody else that gave super chats.
Hold on. Let me get the names. That is important. Thank you so much to JP, Alberta Independence, I think. Sean, also, thank you so much.
And JP again.
Justin GP as well. Thank you so much. And JP Alberta First. That was the name. Thank you again so much. Oh, hold on. And we have another one. And thank you so much to Smile to Life Every Day, saying your babies would be adorable. Thank you so much for the $5 super chat.
Oh, thank you.
It's in the works. Don't worry about it.
They have a big nose and no chin, I think.
I had a friend that said, I'll say it on RUMBLE.
Okay.
I can't say it here, but something about what our baby's supposed to look like. Right now, it looks like a French bulldog. But it's coming soon. Don't worry about it. I'll let you know. But thank you so much. Smile to Life Every Day. Okay, we'll see you over at RUMBLE.
Let's get ready to rumble!
And we're back. Thank you so much.